Every family had a cookbook that nobody used anymore, and inside it were recipes that could still feed a full table better than anything in the frozen aisle today. Pot roasts seasoned with nothing but salt, pepper, and an onion soup mix packet. Casseroles built around a can of cream of mushroom and whatever was left in the refrigerator. Pies with lard crusts that crumbled the second you pressed a fork into them. Some of these recipes fed a household of 6 for loose change. Others showed up at every funeral, every church supper, every potluck for decades, and then vanished quietly when the person who made them stopped cooking. Number 47 is a one-pot meal that appeared in nearly every community cookbook printed between the 1940s and 1970s, and today most people under 50 have never heard of it. Number 83 is a breakfast that used to start every Saturday morning in houses across the South, and it takes less than 10 minutes. Here are 100 recipes that disappeared into old cookbooks and never came back out. Number 30. Watercress soup. Open any American cookbook printed before 1920, and watercress soup is in there. Every single one. You picked the cress from a cold stream or bought a bunch for pennies at the market. Washed it, chopped it rough, simmered it in chicken broth with a sliced potato or two until everything went soft, then mashed the whole thing with a fork. No blender, no cream, just the sharp, peppery taste of something that grew wild along every creek bank in the country. Some cooks stirred in a spoonful of butter at the end. Others added a splash of vinegar. Either way, it was bright green and it tasted like spring before spring had a name. You will not find watercress soup on any restaurant menu in America today. Number 30. Slug burger. Northern Mississippi cooks invented this little patty when ground beef went past a working family's reach, and they stretched a quarter pound of meat into 4 sandwiches with potato flakes, flour, or cornmeal. The original price was a nickel, and in the 1930s, a nickel was called a slug, which is where the name came from. John Weeks ran the first stand in Corinth, and his trick was to deep fry the thinned patty so the outside crisped while the inside stayed tender. Mustard, raw onion, and a flat pickle were the only dressings served on a soft white bun from the bakery on the corner. Old cookbooks listed the filler ratio openly because nobody pretended it was all beef. Corinth still throws a slug burger festival every July, but the home recipe slid out of the binders one reprint at a time. Lebkuchen were once the crown jewels of German-American Christmas baking, carrying centuries of European tradition into immigrant kitchens across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin. These spiced honey cakes required weeks of preparation, with dough mixed and aged in cool cellars to develop their characteristic deep flavor. The recipe called for honey warmed until liquid, mixed with brown sugar, eggs, and an aromatic blend of cinnamon, cloves, allspice, cardamom, and black pepper that filled homes with warmth. Candied citron, orange peel, and almonds were folded through the dough before it was rolled and cut into hearts, rectangles, or rounds. After baking until just set, each cookie received a brushing of rum glaze or a coating of white icing that hardened to a crackling finish. Families stored them in tins for weeks, knowing the flavors would meld and soften into something approaching perfection. Children watched their grandmothers work, learning that true Christmas baking was measured not in hours, but in patience and love. Mock turkey loaf was the centerpiece that saved Thanksgiving when whole birds cost too much for struggling families. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, celery, and poultry seasoning was shaped into a loaf that looked remarkably like sliced turkey when carved. The mixture was packed into bread pans, baked until golden, and served with gravy. The result was surprisingly convincing, with breadcrumbs creating texture that mimicked turkey while sage gave holiday flavor. Mothers prepared these loaves the night before, allowing them to chill for easier slicing. Children couldn't tell the difference when smothered in gravy, and adults appreciated stretching 2 pounds of beef into meals feeding 8 people. The loaf represented dignity during hardship, allowing families to gather around something resembling celebration. Cookbooks from 1963 featured multiple versions. Super burgers were the kind of dish that could only come from the mid-century kitchen when convenience cooking was booming and families wanted meals that stretched every dollar. The recipe was as simple as it was strange. You took ground beef, mixed it with a can of condensed Campbell's soup, spread it across split buns, and then baked them until the meat set and the tops bubbled. They were open-faced burgers that looked a little off, but somehow satisfied when money and ingredients were running thin. Kids loved them because it felt like fast food, while mothers loved them because the soup did the heavy lifting with seasoning. It was also a budget trick since the soup made the beef go further and added bulk that kept bellies full. While the Superburger has disappeared from cookbooks and most memories, it stands as a reminder of how much creativity and compromise went into everyday meals in the 1950s and 1960s. They were quirky, cheap, and surprisingly comforting for what they were. Crescent roll hot dog wraps were the kind of fun, quick trick that could turn an ordinary package of Franks into something kids begged for again and again. Instead of simply boiling or frying hot dogs, home cooks wrapped each one in buttery crescent dough and baked them until golden. The scent that filled the kitchen was unmistakable, a mix of toasted bread and sizzling hot dog, and it felt like a celebration even on a weeknight. These little rolls were perfect for lunchboxes, after-school snacks, or birthday parties, and they looked more impressive than the small effort it took to make them. Parents loved how fast they came together and how reliable the recipe was, while kids were thrilled at the novelty of having their favorite food wrapped up like a gift. This was the kind of Betty Crocker idea that spread quickly through kitchens across America because it required little more than a can of dough and a package of Franks. Even today, the memory of biting into that flaky crust with a hot dog inside can take people right back to childhood. Shrimp wiggle was the kind of dish that perfectly captured the spirit of mid-century convenience cooking, and it was as charmingly simple as it sounds. Housewives looking to put something quick and satisfying on the table would open a can of shrimp, another can of peas, and stir both into a quick white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. Once thickened, the whole mixture would be spooned generously over toast, biscuits, or even rice. What made this dish endure in old cookbooks was not only how inexpensive it was, but how much it looked like a true dinner, when in reality it took barely 10 minutes from start to finish. Children loved the creamy sauce and bright peas, while adults felt like they were eating something elegant thanks to the shrimp. The name itself added a little bit of fun, which made this meal a small morale booster in an otherwise frugal kitchen. Creamed corn and hot dog skillet was the kind of quick meal that families leaned on when time and money were both in short supply. Sliced hot dogs were browned in a skillet, giving off a savory aroma that kids instantly recognized before a can of creamed corn was stirred in to create a creamy, salty base. It was simple, filling, and ready in just minutes, making it an easy solution for weeknights when something warm had to be on the table fast. The sweetness of the corn balanced the smoky flavor of the hot dogs, and the dish could be stretched further by serving it over bread or rice. This kind of recipe spoke to the ingenuity of mid-century home cooking, where canned goods and inexpensive meats formed the backbone of family meals. It may not sound glamorous, but for families who grew up on it, creamed corn and hot dog skillet carries a kind of comfort that only comes from food born out of necessity and love. Pigtail stew was a slow-cooked, hearty dish that turned inexpensive pork pigtails into a deeply flavorful meal treasured in many African-American homes. This stew simmered the tough, gelatin-rich cuts for hours with aromatic vegetables and spices, creating a rich broth that was both comforting and economical. Historically, pigtails were a go-to ingredient during times when budgets were tight and every part of the animal was valued for nourishment. The stew reflected a resourceful cooking tradition, transforming humble ingredients into satisfying family dinners. Often accompanied by cornbread or rice, pigtail stew carried the flavors of the South and the resilience of a community making the most of limited resources. This recipe remains a testament to culinary ingenuity and cultural pride, showcasing how simple cuts of meat could become cherished comfort food. For many, it was not just a meal, but a link to ancestral cooking practices passed down through generations. Rediscovering this recipe reveals both the creativity and heart that defined old African-American cookbooks and kitchens. Mock duck loaf was a staple in many church kitchens when meat was either too expensive or unavailable. Made primarily from textured vegetable protein or seasoned gluten, This loaf was a clever vegetarian alternative that gave congregations a sense of indulgence without breaking budgets. The loaf was carefully seasoned with herbs, spices, and sometimes a splash of Worcestershire sauce to mimic the savory flavors of traditional meatloaf. Its texture was firm but tender, easily sliced for serving alongside mashed potatoes or green beans. While it might sound simple today, back then this dish was revolutionary in offering a meatless main course that could still satisfy hearty appetites. Its popularity grew in times when rationing was common or during Lent when meatless meals were a religious requirement. Church groups often took pride in perfecting their version, sometimes adding a tomato-based glaze on top or folding in bits of nuts and vegetables to add texture and nutrition. This loaf was as much about community spirit as it was about sustenance, a dish that brought people together to enjoy a meal without excess, reflecting the values of thrift and fellowship. Even today, some old church cookbooks treasure this recipe as a reminder of simpler, resourceful times. Cornmeal casserole was a staple in many American homes, especially when budgets were tight and stretching ingredients mattered most. This simple baked dish combined basic pantry staples like cornmeal, eggs, and milk to create a hearty side, or even a main dish that could feed a family without breaking the bank. The recipe was straightforward enough for beginner cooks and required no fancy equipment or ingredients. Cornmeal gave the casserole a slightly grainy texture and a comforting golden color, while the eggs acted as a binder to hold everything together during baking. Milk added richness and moisture, ensuring the casserole was never dry or bland. Families could easily adjust the seasoning to taste, sometimes adding a pinch of salt, pepper, or a dash of sugar depending on what was on hand. This casserole often appeared in community cookbooks and government pamphlets encouraging economical meal planning during lean times. It was versatile too, sometimes served plain alongside soup or stews, and other times topped with leftover vegetables or bits of cheese when available. For many, cornmeal casserole was more than just food. It was a symbol of resourcefulness and comfort, a way to make modest ingredients feel like a feast on the table. Parker House rolls were the kind of soft, buttery rolls that seemed to appear on every family table without fail. These rolls baked quickly in the oven and had a distinct folded shape that gave them a slightly crispy outside and a fluffy, tender inside. Their rich butter flavor and simple ingredients made them a staple that anyone could whip up even on busy weeknights. What made these rolls especially appealing was their versatility. They paired well with soups, stews, or just a pat of butter on their own. People loved them for holidays and everyday meals alike, and they were often part of the tradition in many American households. The recipe was straightforward enough that even beginner cooks could master it, adding to its popularity. With the convenience of a quick baking time, Parker House rolls fit perfectly into the post-war era's need for efficient yet comforting foods. They remain a nostalgic favorite, reminding many of cozy family dinners and the smell of fresh bread wafting through the kitchen. Ranch-style baked potatoes were a crowd pleaser on many mid-century American dinner tables. These potatoes were baked to a fluffy perfection, then smothered in a creamy ranch-flavored topping that brought a delightful mix of herbs and tangy zest. The ranch dressing blend, rich with buttermilk, garlic, and dill, made these spuds anything but ordinary. Imagine biting into a warm potato where the skin is slightly crisp and the inside bursts with smooth, flavorful goodness that dances on your tongue. This side dish was perfect for family dinners or potlucks, offering comforting familiarity with a touch of indulgence. Ranch-style baked potatoes were not just about flavor, but also about warmth and homeliness, fitting seamlessly alongside classic meatloaf or roast chicken. The ease of preparation and the simple ingredients made this recipe a staple in many Betty Crocker cookbooks, cherished by home cooks who wanted to impress without spending hours in the kitchen. Whether served plain or with a sprinkle of extra cheese or chopped chives, this dish remains a nostalgic favorite for those who remember the days of vintage comfort food. Turkey croquettes with gravy were one of those elegant little tricks church ladies knew how to pull off after a holiday dinner. Leftover turkey would be shredded, mixed with a white sauce or mashed potatoes, then shaped into tidy little patties or oblong logs. Some rolled them in cracker crumbs, others used cornflake dust for the coating. Then they were fried to a golden brown and served warm with gravy poured right over the top. These were not everyday meals. They were for after Easter or Thanksgiving, when the bird had been picked clean and the bones had already gone to soup. But nothing went to waste. Not the drippings, not the stuffing, and definitely not the last bits of meat. Church cookbooks from the 1950s and 1960s are full of croquette recipes, especially in regions where thrift and grace went hand in hand. These were also popular with church auxiliary groups and potluck planners who needed something warm, filling, and presentable to serve a crowd. They looked nice on a platter, they reheated easily, and they made a little leftover go a long way. In small towns and church halls, that was always worth something. Potato chip casserole topping was one of those strange little tricks that somehow made dinner feel like a treat. Back in the day, people did not have access to fancy breadcrumbs or crunchy imported cheeses, and boxed mixes were still a novelty. But they almost always had a bag of plain potato chips sitting around, maybe a little stale, maybe half-eaten, maybe on sale. So when it came time to top a casserole, instead of breadcrumbs or fried onions, cooks reached for that crinkled bag, crushed it up in their hands, and sprinkled the pieces across the top. Into the oven it went, and out came something golden, salty, and unexpectedly satisfying. That simple potato chip crust made otherwise bland casseroles feel indulgent, and the trick was proudly passed down in community cookbooks, church bulletins, and lunchroom chatter. It was cheap, it was crunchy, and best of all, it used something people already had. There were even recipes that told you to mix the crushed chips with melted margarine or powdered cheese before baking, because if you were going to commit to a topping, you might as well go all in. There is just something so right about a casserole with a potato chip crown. Shrimp mold with crackers is one of those dishes that sounds like a dare now, but was considered peak elegance in the 1960s. Picture a wobbly, pastel-colored gelatin mold on the center of the table, filled with bits of shrimp, diced celery, and a creamy, tangy base, usually thanks to mayonnaise or cream cheese. It was the kind of appetizer you spotted at cocktail parties, holiday dinners, or those once-a-year neighborhood events where folks pulled out their best recipes. You would serve it with buttery crackers, and everyone would politely scoop a little on their plate while pretending they were at a fancy hotel banquet. The shrimp mold was a sign of the times when gelatin was not just for dessert and molded food was the ultimate showpiece. Recipes for this were clipped from women's magazines and tucked into community cookbooks, right next to lime jello salads and aspics. It may sound strange now, but back then, the shrimp mold meant you had made an effort, and nothing impressed like a shimmering, seafood-filled centerpiece wobbling in the middle of the table. Corn pudding casserole was the side dish that made even the humblest dinner plate feel warm and complete. If you flipped through old recipe cards tucked behind flour jars, chances are this one was written in your grandmother's handwriting. It combined sweet corn, butter, eggs, and milk into a creamy bake that sat proudly next to roast ham or pork chops. It was easy, affordable, and filled bellies, making it a go-to for potlucks, church suppers, and holidays. The top baked up golden brown, the inside stayed soft and rich, and every bite reminded you how folks pulled meals together from what they had. Corn pudding casserole carried meals through tough times, earning its place in kitchens from the Depression to the 70s. You do not see it much now, but back then, that creamy baked corn meant comfort on a plate. Number 29. Pumpkin soup. Long before any European wrote it down, pumpkin was already being simmered in pots across this continent. By the 1700s, every colonial cookbook in New England had a version. You cut a pumpkin in half, roasted it until the flesh went soft, scraped it out, and simmered it in milk or broth with nutmeg and ginger. Some cooks sweetened it with molasses. Others kept it savory with salt and butter. The flavor was earthy and rich, and it showed up on autumn tables from Connecticut to Virginia as reliably as cold weather. Then canned pumpkin arrived, and the only thing Americans made with pumpkin came out of a pie tin. Before I move on, for those of you who want recipes like these all in one place, I wrote the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is a cookbook filled with forgotten recipes just like the ones you are hearing today. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again in this video. If it sounds like something you want, it is right there. Now back to the soups. Number 29, Hoover Stew. Families named this pot after the president they blamed for the bread lines, and the irony stuck so hard that the recipe outlived the administration. The bones of it were 4 ingredients you could keep on a shelf: a box of macaroni, a tin of stewed tomatoes, a can of corn, and a few hot dogs sliced into coins. The hot dogs went in last so the casing did not split, and the corn liquid went straight into the pot because nobody threw away a spoon of broth in 1932. Mothers in Hooverville camps cooked it over open fires in coffee cans, and the smell drifted between the tar paper shacks at supper time. A pound of macaroni at 6 cents and a nickel pack of Franks fed a family of 5. Old church cookbooks listed it under the name of macaroni stew, but the kids in the back pews knew exactly what it was. Pfeffernusse appeared on Christmas tables across the Midwest wherever German and Scandinavian families settled, bringing these small, round spice cookies dusted white with powdered sugar. The name meant pepper nuts, though the heat came from a complex blend of cinnamon, anise, cardamom, and cloves that created warmth without fire. The dough was stiff and required strong arms to mix, combining molasses, honey, and butter with flour until it could be rolled into small balls the size of walnuts. After baking until firm, the cookies were tossed while still warm in clouds of powdered sugar that clung to their rough surfaces like fresh snow. Stored in tins, they softened over days, the spices mellowing into something both sweet and deeply aromatic. Church cookie exchanges featured platters of Pfeffernusse, each family's version slightly different based on grandmother's proportions. These cookies represented the long journey from the old country to new American kitchens, carrying tradition in every spiced bite. Depression dressing carried its name from the 1930s into 1960s kitchens where thrift remained essential for family survival. Day-old bread torn into chunks was mixed with diced onions, celery leaves that would otherwise be discarded, and just enough broth to moisten without making it soggy. The mixture contained no butter, no eggs, no expensive herbs beyond a pinch of dried sage saved from last year's garden. It was spread in shallow pans and baked until the top formed a golden crust while the interior stayed soft and savory, absorbing gravy beautifully. The dressing transformed humble bread into something that felt substantial and comforting on holiday tables. 6 slices of stale bread became enough dressing for 10 people when stretched with vegetables and liquid. The technique required attention, checking frequently to prevent burning while ensuring enough crispness developed. Home economists praised depression dressing as smart homemaking, teaching young wives how their grandmothers had survived harder times. Tomato soup popsicles might sound like a prank today, but back in the 1950s, they were actually promoted as a wholesome treat. The idea was simple. Take condensed tomato soup, dilute it slightly with milk or water, freeze it in molds, and present it as a healthy snack for children. In a world where dessert was often rationed or costly, these frozen soup pops were pitched as a way to get vegetables into children while giving them something sweet and cool for summer. Of course, anyone who tried one quickly realized that cold tomato soup on a stick was not exactly a crowd pleaser. Still, Campbell's leaned into the health angle and even printed variations in promotional cookbooks. Parents bought into it for a while, trying to sneak nutrition into dessert time, but the idea faded fast once children figured out the trick. Today, tomato soup popsicles survive only as one of those oddball vanished recipes that makes you wonder how far advertising could push families. Cheese-stuffed crescent triangles were an easy but satisfying dish that gave simple cheddar cheese a moment to shine. The dough was cut, folded, and sealed into small triangles with cubes or shreds of cheddar inside, then baked until the cheese melted into a gooey surprise. They were often served during family game nights, bridge clubs, or casual gatherings when people wanted a snack that felt warm and filling but did not require hours of work. The crispy edges, soft center, and melted cheese combined to create a bite that was both rich and comforting. These were versatile too, since cooks could use whatever cheese was on hand, from sharp cheddar to mild American, making them both economical and flexible. Betty Crocker cookbooks often suggested them as appetizers for entertaining, and once people tried them, they quickly became repeat favorites. There was something about pulling apart one of those golden triangles and watching the cheese stretch that felt indulgent even in the most modest setting. Mock egg lemon soup was a Depression-era lifesaver that made its way into many family recipe cards and church cookbooks. The premise was simple. Instead of long-simmered chicken soup, you heated up a quick broth, whisked in eggs, and added a squeeze of lemon for brightness. The hot broth would cook the eggs almost instantly, creating silky strands that thickened the liquid without any flour or cream. In less than 10 minutes, you had a dish that tasted like comfort but cost next to nothing. Families appreciated the warm, tangy flavor on cold days, and since both eggs and lemons could stretch across several meals, this soup quickly became a favorite. Its Greek inspiration was often mentioned, but the thrifty American version was much lighter and faster. You could have a pot on the table in the time it took to set out the bowls, making it one of those resourceful recipes that never really went away. Velveeta and tomato soup dip was a dish that embodied the comfort and convenience of mid-century American entertaining. By melting processed Velveeta cheese into canned tomato soup, homemakers created a quick, warm dip that could be served with crackers or breadsticks in minutes. It was a crowd pleaser at card nights, community gatherings, and holiday parties, offering something both creamy and tangy without much effort. Velveeta's smooth, melting quality made it ideal for dips, while the tomato soup added a savory base that stretched the cheese further. Guests often gathered around bowls of this dip, scooping up bites while chatting, making it as much a social dish as a culinary one. For many families, it was a go-to recipe because it required no special skill and relied entirely on inexpensive pantry staples. While today's party spreads may lean more gourmet, Velveeta and tomato soup dip was once a symbol of hospitality and the ease of mid-century entertaining. Molasses glazed ham combined the sweet, robust flavor of molasses with savory ham to create an economical yet indulgent dish common in mid-century Southern kitchens. This recipe made use of affordable ham cuts, often shoulder or picnic hams, which were slow-cooked and then brushed generously with a sticky molasses glaze. The glaze caramelized in the oven, infusing the meat with rich sweetness, balanced by a hint of saltiness. Molasses was a staple sweetener in African American households, valued for its deep flavor and affordability compared to refined sugar. The dish was a centerpiece at family gatherings and holiday meals, symbolizing both celebration and resourcefulness. Cooking ham with molasses allowed cooks to stretch ingredients while still producing a dish that felt special and satisfying. Though less common today, this recipe reflects a culinary heritage of making the most out of pantry staples while honoring flavor. Its lingering aroma and rich taste evoke memories of home kitchens filled with warmth and tradition. Oyster stew was often the dish of choice in colder months, cherished for its rich, creamy texture and subtle ocean flavor. Traditionally made with either canned or fresh oysters, this stew brought a sense of warmth and comfort to church suppers, especially during holidays or special occasions. The oysters were gently simmered in a milk or cream-based broth, often seasoned with a bit of onion, celery, and sometimes a dash of nutmeg for depth. This simple yet elegant dish was both affordable and filling, making it perfect for large gatherings. Though oysters might seem like a luxury today, canned oysters were widely accessible and a practical choice for many communities. The stew was typically served with warm, crusty bread for dipping, rounding out the meal. Its creamy richness offered a satisfying alternative to heavier meat-based dishes, especially in congregations that observed fasting or preferred lighter fare. Oyster stew was more than just a recipe. It was a tradition carried across generations, often featured in handwritten church cookbooks passed down as treasured family heirlooms. It represented not only nourishment, but also a shared history of resourcefulness and simple pleasures in communal dining. Canned salmon loaf was an ingenious recipe born out of necessity and creativity, turning an affordable protein source into a filling and flavorful meal. Using canned salmon as the base, this loaf mixed in eggs, breadcrumbs, and sometimes simple seasonings to stretch the fish into a substantial dish that could serve several hungry mouths. The ingredients were easy to find in most pantries, especially during times when fresh meat and fish were scarce or expensive. Eggs helped to bind the mixture, while breadcrumbs gave the loaf structure and texture. This recipe also made excellent use of leftovers. Sometimes small amounts of cooked vegetables or a splash of cream would be added for extra flavor and moisture. Canned salmon loaf was baked until golden brown on the outside and tender inside, making it a perfect entree to serve with mashed potatoes, steamed greens, or a simple salad. The dish reflected a time when canned goods were prized for their long shelf life and convenience, and when home cooks had to be resourceful to feed their families. Cheese and ham toasties were the go-to open-faced sandwiches that warmed countless kitchens with their bubbly golden finish. This simple dish combined slices of bread, topped with generous layers of cooked ham and melted cheese, then broiled until the cheese reached that perfect stretch and the edges of the bread crisped slightly. They were beloved for their rich flavor and the satisfying combination of savory ham with creamy, gooey cheese. Beyond their taste, these toasties were quick to make and required very few ingredients, which made them ideal for those hectic days when dinner needed to be on the table fast. Often served as a light meal or snack, they captured the spirit of mid-century home cooking, straightforward, filling, and comforting. This recipe was especially handy when the family wanted something warm without spending too much time in the kitchen. Their simplicity did not sacrifice flavor, making cheese and ham toasties a nostalgic reminder of those quick yet satisfying meals shared around kitchen tables. Orange Jell-O salad was a shining star of many a mid-century dinner spread, bringing a burst of sunshine to the table. This side dish combined citrusy gelatin with crushed pineapple or mandarin oranges, offering a sweet and tangy profile that refreshed the palate between heavier courses. The translucent orange hue gleamed under the dining room light, hinting at the fruity delight within. It was common to find recipes in Betty Crocker cookbooks encouraging creative additions like mini marshmallows, shredded coconut, or chopped nuts for added texture. The cool, wobbly nature of the Jell-O made it a playful contrast to the warm, savory mains. This salad was often served chilled, providing a moment of lightness and joy during meals where meat and potatoes dominated. Kids loved it for its sweetness and fun texture, while adults appreciated the nostalgia it evoked. Its simplicity made it a go-to for busy home cooks, and its bright flavor profile helped lift spirits, especially during winter months. Orange Jell-O salad was truly a dessert and a side dish all wrapped in one delightful package. Beef and cabbage casserole was a dish you could smell down the church basement stairs long before you saw it. It started with ground beef browned in a skillet, sometimes with onion or a bit of garlic salt. Then came chopped cabbage, tomato soup, and maybe a sprinkle of rice or elbow macaroni to stretch it. All of it went into a casserole dish and baked until the top browned and the edges bubbled up. It was not fancy, but it stuck with you. In colder regions, especially during late fall suppers and Lenten fundraisers, this casserole was a dependable standby. It filled bellies fast and had that tangy sweet tomato flavor people kept coming back for. Some church ladies added Worcestershire sauce or topped it with crushed crackers. Others swore by using V8 juice instead of soup. But no matter the variation, the soul of the dish stayed the same. Cheap beef, fresh or old cabbage, and whatever starch would hold it all together. You could cook it in the morning, reheat it in the evening, and feel good about not spending much. It made its way into church cookbooks because it was a humble classic, the kind of meal that fed people well and asked for very little in return. Coffee can bread baking was born out of pure practicality, but it somehow felt a little magical too. If you had a clean empty can, anywhere from an old coffee tin to a leftover fruit cocktail can, you had yourself a bread pan. These cans were used for everything from banana bread to steamed Boston brown bread, and they gave each loaf that tall, round look you could not get from a standard pan. The inside of the can would be greased with bacon fat or butter, filled partway with dough, and then either baked or steamed depending on the recipe. The end result was a soft, rich bread with a golden crust and a shape that stood proud on the plate. Some cans were even reused again and again, passed down like family heirlooms, with their dents and scratches telling their own story. And when the bread came out, Kids always thought it looked a little like cake, so of course it disappeared in minutes. Old cookbooks called these canned loaves or pantry tins, and for good reason. You made do with what you had, and the results were better than expected. Coffee cans made perfect pans, and no one thought twice about it. Mayonnaise. Ham salad pinwheels were the quirky little snack that somehow showed up at nearly every family get-together, neighborhood party, or church social back in the day. You would take slices of sandwich bread, flatten them out, spread on that creamy ham salad mixture, roll it up tight, and slice it into neat little spirals. It looked way fancier than it really was, which is probably why every old cookbook with curled pages swore by them. Ham salad itself was a thrifty recipe made with ground ham, mayonnaise, and whatever odds and ends you had in the fridge, sometimes relish, sometimes chopped pickles, even hard-boiled eggs when you were feeling extravagant. It stretched leftover meat into enough filling for an entire party platter, and those pinwheels made sure nothing went to waste. They were the kind of thing you saw at baby showers, school fundraisers, and potlucks where everyone brought something homemade. Over time, they quietly slipped off menus as fancier finger foods took over. Celery Victor sounds like a recipe that came from a fancy hotel menu, but this marinated celery dish made its way into regular households thanks to those old cookbook collections in every drawer. It was as simple as boiling celery until tender, chilling it in broth or vinegar, and serving it up with herbs or hard-boiled eggs when you wanted to show off. You could find it at potlucks or holiday tables, dressed up to look fancier than it was. People back then knew how to stretch even the humblest ingredients into something worthy of company. Celery Victor turned plain celery into a crisp, tangy salad that felt like a proper side dish next to roasted meats or casseroles. It showed up in cookbooks throughout the 1930s and 40s, passed along at church suppers and family gatherings. Number 28. Philadelphia Pepper Pot. The legend says George Washington's cook invented this soup at Valley Forge to keep starving soldiers alive, and whether that story is true or not, the soup itself is real. Tripe cut into small squares, potatoes, onions, celery, and enough black pepper to make your eyes water. It simmered all day in a heavy pot and came out thick enough to hold a spoon upright. Street vendors in Philadelphia called out pepper pot, smoking hot from their carts well into the 1900s. The tripe is what killed it. Once Americans decided they did not want to eat stomach lining anymore, pepper pot went from everyday street food to a recipe nobody could give away. The soup stayed the same. The country moved on. Number 28. Water pie. This one shows up in handwritten margins more than printed pages because no respectable editor wanted to admit the filling was tap water. The cook poured a cup and a half of water into an unbaked crust, sprinkled flour and sugar over the surface without stirring, dotted the top with butter pats, and slid it into a hot oven. The flour rose, the sugar caramelized, and the butter melted into a translucent custard that set into something like vanilla pudding by the time it cooled. Cooks in coal country called it hard times pie, and it ran 2 cents a slice when milk was a luxury and eggs went into the gravy first. The recipe disappeared from glossy cookbooks by 1955 because nobody wanted a reminder of the years it came from. Spring roll demanded artistry that few modern bakers possess, requiring carved wooden molds passed through generations to press intricate designs into anise-flavored dough. German families treasured their spring roll molds the way others kept heirloom silver, some dating back a century with images of flowers, animals, and holiday scenes carved deep into hardwood. The dough was deceptively simple. Eggs beaten with sugar until thick and pale, then mixed with flour and anise extract until smooth enough to roll thin. Pressed into floured molds and carefully turned out, each cookie bore raised images of astonishing detail that held shape through baking. The cookies dried overnight before baking slowly until barely golden, then aged for weeks where the anise flavor deepened and texture softened. Spring roll appeared at Christmas dinners as edible art, admired before eaten. The skill required meant fewer women each generation could produce them, until these remarkable cookies nearly vanished from American tables entirely. Water gravy transformed basic ingredients into sauce that made dry meat and plain dressing taste like abundance for budget-conscious families. The technique started with whatever fat was available, usually bacon grease or meat drippings, heated in cast iron until shimmering and ready. Flour was whisked in slowly, creating a roux that cooked until golden and nutty smelling, the foundation of all good gravy. Then came water, added gradually while stirring constantly to prevent lumps from forming, along with salt, pepper, and sometimes a splash of kitchen bouquet for deeper color and flavor. The gravy simmered until it thickened enough to coat the back of a spoon, becoming smooth and rich despite containing no stock, no wine, no cream. Families poured it generously over everything on their plates, the hot sauce bringing moisture and flavor to economical foods that needed help. Cookbook authors acknowledged that while broth made better gravy, water gravy kept families fed when resources ran low during difficult times. Souped-up pancakes were another quirky Campbell's experiment that turned heads in the 1950s and 60s. The base recipe was just like any normal pancake mix, but instead of using plain milk, you stirred in condensed tomato soup. What came out of the skillet were bright orange pancakes with a tangy aftertaste that baffled many first-timers. They were often served with savory toppings like cheese or ham instead of syrup, which gave them a strange in-between identity. Some families swore by them as a breakfast change-up, while others tried once and never looked back. The marketing behind them leaned on the "add a vegetable to breakfast" line, suggesting that soup could make flapjacks healthier and more substantial. The reality was that most people could not quite reconcile the sweet tang of soup in their morning stack. Still, souped-up pancakes were remembered fondly by a few who liked to experiment, and they vanished from cookbooks once the novelty wore off. Crescent roll pizza pockets were a playful twist on Italian-American pizza that gained traction during the 1970s when families wanted fun, kid-friendly meals at home. By filling crescent dough with sauce, mozzarella, and small toppings like pepperoni or vegetables, home cooks could recreate the flavors of a pizzeria in bite-sized form. These little pockets baked quickly, making them perfect for weeknights or sleepovers when kids craved something exciting without waiting long. Parents appreciated that they could control portions and ingredients while still delivering the flavor children begged for. The ease of sealing and baking the dough meant even beginners could pull off the recipe without fear of failure. In many ways, they reflected the decade's fascination with convenience and creativity, where cookbooks encouraged playful riffs on classic dishes. They were portable, delicious, and endlessly customizable, which made them ideal for families balancing time and taste. Biting into one hot from the oven with melted cheese inside was a memory that lingered long after. Banana and sour cream salad might sound unusual today, but in the middle of the 20th century, it was a prized quick dish that often doubled as dessert. Cookbooks called for nothing more than slicing ripe bananas, layering them neatly on a plate, covering them with sour cream, and sprinkling the top with a dusting of sugar. In less than 10 minutes, you had a salad that was creamy, tangy, and sweet all at once. Housewives appreciated how it used just 3 ingredients, yet looked elegant enough for luncheons or church gatherings. Children enjoyed the sweetness, while adults saw it as a lighter alternative to heavier pies or cakes. What made it endure was how easy it was to scale. A single banana could serve one person, or several could fill a platter. It was also one of those recipes that made use of fruit before it spoiled, which was essential in thrifty kitchens. Peanut butter and lettuce sandwich might sound strange today, but it was once a familiar part of thrifty American kitchens. Born out of Depression-era resourcefulness, it lingered in mid-century cookbooks because it was affordable, nutritious, and surprisingly refreshing. A thick layer of peanut butter spread over bread was topped with crisp lettuce, creating a mix of creamy and crunchy textures. The combination of savory nuttiness with the cool freshness of lettuce made it more satisfying than it might seem at first glance. Parents liked it because it was easy to prepare, while children often found it a curious but filling lunch option. It appeared in school lunchboxes, community cookbooks, and even wartime guides to simple eating, cementing its place in food history. Though unusual by modern standards, It was a clear reflection of a time when cooks stretched simple pantry staples into meals that were both practical and memorable. Okra fritters were a beloved snack or side dish featuring chopped okra mixed into a seasoned batter and fried to golden crispiness. These fritters combined the natural sliminess of okra with crunchy breading to create a texture that was both unique and comforting. Popular in African American cooking, okra was a widely cultivated vegetable with deep roots tracing back to African cuisine. The fritters were often served alongside main dishes or enjoyed as a casual treat, showcasing the versatility of okra beyond stews and soups. The batter typically included cornmeal or flour, herbs, and spices to enhance the flavor and add a satisfying bite. Okra fritters were a practical and tasty way to celebrate local produce while creating a dish that appealed to all ages. Their crispy exterior and tender interior made them a crowd favorite at family dinners and community gatherings. This recipe exemplifies how traditional ingredients were elevated through simple, skillful preparation. Eggplant Parmesan casserole made its way into church suppers as a hearty, satisfying dish that stood apart from the usual potluck fare. While today it is a beloved classic, back then it was less common and somewhat exotic, lending an air of novelty to community meals. The casserole was built with layers of breaded fried eggplant slices, rich tomato sauce, and generous amounts of cheese such as mozzarella and parmesan. Baked until bubbly and golden, it offered a perfect balance of textures and flavors that appealed to both vegetarians and meat-eaters alike. This dish was especially popular in churches with Italian or Mediterranean heritage, reflecting regional tastes brought by immigrant communities. Its preparation required time and care, making it a dish often reserved for special gatherings or holiday dinners. The casserole was as much about celebration as it was about sharing, a dish that showcased creativity and the joy of communal cooking. Over time, it became a symbol of comfort and hospitality, bridging cultural divides through food. Today, it remains a reminder of how churches embraced diverse cuisines and adapted them into their own traditions. Mock biscuits and gravy was a clever way to enjoy a classic Southern comfort food without the usual cost or effort. These biscuits were made from basic ingredients like flour, baking powder, fat, and milk or water, often skipping eggs to keep costs down. Despite the simplicity, the biscuits came out tender and flaky, perfect for soaking up gravy. The gravy itself was a budget-friendly white sauce made from milk, flour, and fat, flavored with salt and pepper, and sometimes enhanced with bits of cooked vegetables or leftover meat drippings. This version of biscuits and gravy was especially popular in families who wanted to stretch a small amount of ingredients into a filling breakfast or dinner. The gravy was thick and creamy, coating each biscuit and making each bite comforting and satisfying. Mock biscuits and gravy appeared frequently in old Betty Crocker cookbooks as a go-to recipe for economical cooking. It was accessible for cooks of all skill levels and didn't require expensive or exotic ingredients. The easy cheese ball was a party staple that found its way into countless social gatherings thanks to its fast assembly and crowd-pleasing taste. Made by mixing cream cheese with shredded cheddar cheese, along with seasonings that could be adjusted to taste, the mixture was rolled into a compact ball and often coated with chopped nuts or herbs for added texture and flavor. This no-bake recipe required little more than stirring and shaping, making it accessible for even the busiest host. Cheese balls became iconic as appetizer centerpieces during holiday celebrations or casual get-togethers, providing a rich and creamy bite that paired perfectly with crackers or fresh vegetables. The balance of sharp cheddar and smooth cream cheese created a flavor that was both indulgent and nostalgic, reminding many of simpler times spent in lively company. Its speedy preparation and versatile presentation helped cement the cheese ball's place in the canon of vintage party foods, proving that deliciousness and convenience could go hand in hand. Broiled grapefruit with brown sugar was a simple yet elegant side dish that warmed many hearts and kitchens. Halved grapefruits were topped generously with brown sugar, then broiled until caramelized, creating a slightly crisp, golden crust that contrasted with the juicy tart fruit beneath. The result was a warm, zesty bite that balanced sweetness and tang in a way that felt both indulgent and healthy. This dish appeared in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a bright finish to heavier meals or as a breakfast treat for those wanting something fresh yet comforting. The caramelized sugar added depth and a subtle crunch, turning humble grapefruit into a dessert-like delight. It was especially popular during winter, when citrus was in season and the warm oven created a cozy kitchen atmosphere. The blend of warmth, tartness, and sweet caramel made this side dish memorable, and it often became a topic of conversation at the family table. It was a wonderful example of how simple ingredients could be transformed into something special with just a broiler and a little patience. Mock chicken legs, often called city chicken, were one of the more creative illusions that came out of old church kitchens. You would take cubes of pork or veal, thread them onto wooden skewers, bread them like fried chicken, and then either fry or bake them. They had nothing to do with chicken except for the fact that they kind of looked like a drumstick when you picked one up. This dish became a hit in the Rust Belt during the 1930s and 1940s when chicken was actually more expensive than pork. Polish and Slovak communities took to it quickly, and so did the churches they were part of. You would find the recipe in all kinds of regional cookbooks from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. These were especially common at church picnics, potlucks, and summer weddings where trays of chicken legs would come out hot and crispy. Some cooks dipped them in gravy, others just served them plain with mashed potatoes and green beans. They were easy to make in big batches and tasted even better the next day. Church ladies loved that. It was thrifty, it was fun, and it made folks smile when they realized the chicken was not chicken at all. Mayonnaise as a cake moistener sounds like a cruel joke until you taste it. In the lean years, especially during the Great Depression and into the war era, people had to get creative when they were short on eggs, milk, or butter. Mayonnaise was made with all three, and it had a smooth, fatty texture that blended beautifully into batter. So when folks wanted to bake a cake but the fridge was bare, they reached for the mayo jar. Chocolate mayonnaise cake became a sleeper hit, especially in mid-century kitchens. It was rich, dark, and impossibly moist, with a texture that stayed soft even days after baking. Cookbooks started including mayo cakes as their own category, with variations that included nuts, cinnamon, or even applesauce. Brands caught on too. Some even printed the recipe on the side of their jars. You could always tell someone grew up during hard times if they looked at a cake and guessed the secret ingredient right away. To this day, some home bakers still swear it is the only way to make a chocolate cake that never dries out. Strange as it sounds, mayonnaise made cakes better, and no one questioned it. Pickle and bologna roll-ups were the ultimate frugal appetizer that made every potluck, party, and picnic table feel complete. You would grab slices of bologna, cheap, easy to find, and always in the fridge. Spread them with a little cream cheese or mustard, roll them around a dill pickle, and secure the whole thing with a toothpick. That was it. No complicated steps, no fancy ingredients, just pure, practical snack engineering. It was the kind of food you saw in old church cookbooks and school event guides, where every recipe had to be affordable and able to feed a crowd. The saltiness of the pickle mixed with the soft bologna made for a snack that was weirdly addictive, especially if you were a kid sneaking one off the plate before dinner started. Over the years, they quietly disappeared as deli platters and store-bought hors d'oeuvres took over. But those little roll-ups were a lifesaver for families who wanted to stretch ingredients and still show up with something on the table. Macaroni and tomatoes was the forgotten side that kept dinner plates full when grocery budgets were stretched thin. You would boil macaroni, toss it with stewed tomatoes, a pat of butter, and maybe onions or cheese if you had extra. It was not glamorous, but it got the job done. You could find this simple pasta side in old community cookbooks from the 40s through the 70s, tucked between casserole recipes and Jell-O molds. Families loved it because it used pantry staples, cost little, and made meals stretch farther. It showed up next to pork chops, meatloaf, or whatever leftovers you had. Macaroni and tomatoes was the quiet hero of the table, filling bellies when money was tight. You do not see it much now, but in its day, it was a practical filling side that showed how far folks could go with a box of pasta and a can of tomatoes. Number 27. Tomato Rarebit Soup. Take a pot of tomato soup and melt sharp cheddar into it until the whole thing turns thick and orange and clings to the back of a spoon. That is tomato rarebit soup. Old cookbooks from the 1930s and 1940s printed it as a weeknight supper, not a starter. You ladled it over toast, the way you would pour gravy over biscuits, and the toast soaked up the cheese and tomato until it was almost too heavy to lift with a fork. Some versions added a beaten egg, stirred in at the last second so it set in ribbons through the broth. Campbell's made tomato soup famous, but the homemade version with cheese and toast was the original, and it was better. Number 27. Hot Milk Cake. The penciled margins of that 5-cent cookbook held this one in 2 short lines because real Depression cooks did not waste ink on a recipe they already knew by heart. A cup of scalded milk hit the beaten eggs, sugar, and flour, and the heat of the milk did the work that creamed butter normally would. The batter cost roughly 14 cents to mix in 1933, and it stretched into a square pan that fed 8 slices for Sunday after church. The crumb came out fine and tight, almost like a sponge, and it stayed moist for 3 days under a clean tea towel. Bakeries sold it sliced for a penny apiece, but mothers made it at home because the oven was already on for the beans. Sand tarts earned their name from their impossibly delicate texture. So fine and crumbly they seemed to dissolve on the tongue like sweet sand. Pennsylvania Dutch families perfected these thin butter cookies, rolling dough paper thin and cutting it into rounds before pressing blanched almonds and cinnamon sugar into each surface. The butter had to be real and plentiful, creamed until nearly white with sugar before eggs and vanilla were beaten in. The dough required chilling until firm, then rolling on floured boards with steady pressure to achieve translucent thinness. Baked until edges turned golden while centers remained pale, these cookies shattered at the first bite into buttery fragments that melted instantly. Families packed them carefully in tins between layers of waxed paper, knowing their fragility required gentle handling. Sand tarts represented the best of Christmas baking. Simple ingredients transformed through skill into something ethereal. Their disappearance marks a loss of patience more than recipe. Carrot and raisin salad brought color and sweetness to Thanksgiving tables without requiring expensive ingredients or complicated preparation that strained budgets. Carrots were peeled and grated by hand using box graters, creating thin shreds that mixed easily with plump raisins that had been soaked briefly in warm water to soften them. The dressing was simply mayonnaise, thinned with a little vinegar and sugar, coating the carrots until they glistened orange and inviting in serving bowls. Some cooks added shredded cabbage to stretch the salad further, while others included chopped celery for additional crunch and volume. The result was sweet, tangy, and refreshing, providing textural contrast to heavier holiday foods while adding vitamins that struggling families needed. Children particularly loved this salad because the raisins offered little bursts of candy-like sweetness hidden among the vegetables. A pound of carrots and small box of raisins created enough salad for 12 people. Campbell's Chili Con. Carn dip was one of those party recipes that briefly exploded in popularity before fading completely. This dip was made by combining tomato soup, chili powder, shredded cheese, and sometimes canned beans into a bubbling hot bowl served with crackers or chips. It was marketed as a Tex-Mex-inspired dish during the post-war fascination with regional American foods. The appeal was simple. It was cheap, easy, and could feed a whole gathering without much effort. For housewives juggling social get-togethers, this was a godsend because it looked hearty, but required only pantry staples. Unfortunately, the flavor did not live up to the hype. It often came out thin, overly tangy, and lacking the rich body of real chili or queso dips. Still, for a brief moment, it was the centerpiece of many card nights and church potlucks. As palates expanded and authentic dips became more common, Campbell's Chili Con Carn dip quietly vanished from the party table. Ham and pickle crescent spirals were the kind of potluck staple that turned ordinary ingredients into something eye-catching and tasty. Thin slices of ham and crisp dill pickles were layered inside crescent dough, rolled tightly, and sliced into small pinwheels before baking. The result was a salty, tangy, and buttery snack that was as fun to look at as it was to eat. These spirals fit right into the tradition of church suppers, community gatherings, and holiday buffets where trays of bite-sized foods were passed around for everyone to share. The flavor was unexpected, but surprisingly balanced, with the sharp pickle cutting through the richness of the ham and dough. Many people first encountered them at a party, then went home eager to try making them themselves because of how simple they were. Betty Crocker promoted recipes like these because they stretched small amounts of ingredients into large servings, which was always appealing to thrifty households. They became one of those quietly memorable foods people remembered decades later with a smile. Ham and pickle relish. Sandwich spread is another reminder of how cookbooks leaned heavily on economy and speed. All it took was grinding up leftover ham, mixing it with a few spoonfuls of sweet pickle relish, and binding it all together with mayonnaise or mustard. In under 10 minutes, you had a spread that could be layered onto bread, stuffed into rolls, or served with crackers. It turned small scraps of meat into something filling, and the relish added enough tang to disguise the fact that the portion of ham was very small. This recipe became especially popular in wartime cookbooks when stretching protein was essential. Families enjoyed the bright, savory flavor and the convenience of having a ready-to-serve sandwich filler. It was perfect for school lunches or quick suppers, and many people still recall this as a nostalgic favorite from their childhood kitchen tables. Mayonnaise banana salad is one of those recipes that perfectly captures the quirky creativity of mid-century cookbooks. It involved halved bananas laid on lettuce leaves, topped with a dollop of mayonnaise and sprinkled with crushed peanuts or sometimes shredded cheese. The result was a dish that looked fancy, tasted unexpectedly rich, and could be put together in under 5 minutes. It was often served as a light starter at luncheons, church potlucks, or even holiday tables, where its odd combination sparked conversation as much as it fed guests. The sweetness of the banana clashed and yet strangely worked with the tang of the mayonnaise, while the crunch of peanuts added contrast. Recipes like this showed how home cooks weren't afraid to experiment with unusual pairings, especially when they could make an inexpensive dish seem special. Though it's largely forgotten now, mayonnaise banana salad remains one of those recipes that people recall with equal parts nostalgia and disbelief. Peach and cornbread pudding was a layered dessert that brought together juicy fresh peaches and moist, crumbly cornbread soaked in a sweet custard. This dish capitalized on the abundance of peaches during harvest season and the staple nature of cornbread in southern kitchens. Home cooks layered slices of cornbread with peeled, sliced peaches before pouring a creamy mixture of eggs, milk, and sugar over the top. The pudding was then baked until golden and set, producing a warm, comforting dessert that balanced fruity sweetness with a buttery texture. This recipe represented a resourceful use of pantry staples and seasonal fruits, turning simple ingredients into a memorable treat. It was often served at family dinners and church socials, embodying both hospitality and tradition. The combination of fruit and cornbread made it a unique contribution to African American culinary heritage, showcasing creativity in desserts. Today, it remains a nostalgic favorite that connects modern palates to classic Southern flavors. Creamed chipped beef on toast without beef was a clever adaptation of a classic budget-conscious dish in church kitchens that needed to stretch ingredients. Instead of using expensive or scarce dried beef, cooks substituted mushrooms or other vegetables to create a creamy, savory sauce served over toast. The mushrooms were finely chopped and sautéed to mimic the texture of chipped beef, then simmered in a white sauce made with milk and a hint of seasoning. This variation was especially popular during times of economic hardship or meat rationing, proving that flavor and comfort could be maintained even with limited resources. The creamy sauce clung perfectly to toasted bread, offering a filling and warm meal that was easy to prepare in large quantities. It was the kind of dish that spoke to practicality without sacrificing taste, a common theme in church cooking where communal meals needed to feed many with simple ingredients. This dish was a testament to the ingenuity of home cooks who found ways to honor tradition while adjusting to their realities. Baked bean and sausage casserole was a slow-cooked, hearty dish combining canned beans with small pieces of sausage to create a flavorful and affordable meal. Beans, often navy or kidney varieties, were a pantry staple thanks to their low cost, long shelf life, and high protein content. Adding sausage pieces, sometimes leftover or inexpensive links, brought a smoky richness that enhanced the beans without requiring large amounts of meat. The casserole was assembled in a baking dish, sometimes with onions or seasonings layered in, then baked slowly to let the flavors meld. This recipe was beloved for its simplicity and versatility. It could feed a family with minimal ingredients and effort. It was common in community cookbooks aimed at budget-conscious home cooks during the mid-1900s, especially during times of rationing or economic difficulty. Baked bean and sausage casserole was often served with bread or a simple salad, making it a complete and filling meal. The dish exemplified the era's focus on making affordable ingredients taste satisfying and comforting at the family table. Baked apple slices with cinnamon were a quick and warm dessert solution for families craving a little sweetness without fuss. Thinly sliced apples were layered in a baking dish, sprinkled with cinnamon and sugar, and then baked until tender and caramelized, releasing a fragrant aroma that filled kitchens. This dessert captured the essence of autumn and holiday seasons, but was simple enough to be enjoyed any time of the year. The combination of tart and sweet from the apples and cinnamon offered comfort and nostalgia, reminding many of home-cooked treats from their childhood. It required no complicated ingredients or long preparation, which made it a perfect choice for those 10-minute meal plans or last-minute dessert needs. Its wholesome nature meant it was also seen as a slightly healthier option compared to heavier sweets, making it popular among families looking to balance flavor with simplicity. The baked apple slices carried the warmth and joy of family gatherings, wrapped in the cozy scent of cinnamon. Carrot and raisin salad was a sweet and tangy side that brightened many American tables throughout the mid-20th century. Shredded carrots were mixed with plump, sweet raisins and dressed in a creamy or tangy sauce, often based on mayonnaise or yogurt, creating a delightful balance of flavors and textures. This salad was celebrated in Betty Crocker cookbooks for its simplicity and its ability to sneak some vegetables into meals with a touch of sweetness kids would actually enjoy. The natural sugar of the raisins complemented the earthiness of the carrots, while the creamy dressing gave it richness without overwhelming the fresh ingredients. It was often served chilled, providing a cool, refreshing bite that paired well with meat dishes and casseroles. The vibrant orange and dark raisin speckles made it visually appealing, while the crunch of the carrots added a satisfying texture. Carrot and raisin salad remains a nostalgic reminder of home cooking where healthy met tasty in a perfect union. Ham and noodle skillet was the kind of meal that came together in a single pan on a busy Wednesday night before choir practice. It started with leftover ham, cubed, chopped, or shaved off the bone, tossed into a hot skillet with egg noodles and a handful of peas. Some folks added mushrooms, others just stirred in a spoonful of sour cream or a pat of butter to keep it rich. The result was warm, salty, and filling with just enough green to count as a vegetable. You could find this dish in nearly every Lutheran or Methodist church cookbook from the 1950s to the 1970s. It was fast, forgiving, and perfect for when dinner needed to be on the table in 20 minutes flat. No oven, no timer, just a stovetop, a wooden spoon, and a skillet. That was part of the appeal. It worked for the women who had worked all day and still had a bake sale to prep for or a committee meeting to attend. Kids ate it without complaint, and men liked it because it tasted like a meal. In homes and churches where time and money were always tight, the ham and noodle skillet got the job done. Boiled salad dressing was the grandmother of everything that came before the grocery aisle. Back before bottled ranch or ready-made vinaigrettes, home cooks whipped up dressings from scratch using what they had in the pantry. This particular one was a little tangy, a little sweet, and usually started with vinegar, sugar, egg yolks, and a bit of mustard powder. Everything was whisked together in a saucepan and cooked low until it thickened like a custard. The result was creamy and tart, perfect for potato salad, coleslaw, or even spooned over hard-boiled eggs. Some versions added flour or cornstarch to help it hold better in the fridge, while others kept it simple. It might not have had the smooth pour of modern dressings, but it had soul and a flavor people still remember. You would find it tucked into the back pages of church cookbooks, labeled Grandma's Dressing or Sweet Egg Sauce. When chilled, it firmed up a little, which made it ideal for picnic salads that had to last in the summer sun. It tasted like resourcefulness. It tasted like memory. And it was surprisingly good. Celery sticks with pimento cheese were the crunchy, creamy appetizer that stretched from southern kitchens all the way to potlucks in every small town across America. You took sturdy stalks of celery, trimmed them up, and filled them with that bright orange pimento cheese spread, the kind made with shredded cheddar, diced pimentos, a little mayo, and maybe some secret seasoning passed down from your grandmother. It was simple, satisfying, and just fancy enough to feel like you brought something special to the table, even when grocery money was tight. You saw these celery boats at family reunions, baby showers, and church suppers, nestled between deviled eggs and Jell-O molds. They were crunchy, cheesy, and gone in minutes, especially if you had kids circling the snack table. Somewhere along the way, they vanished from most parties, replaced by store-bought dips and vegetable trays that never quite hit the same. But for anyone who remembers them, celery with pimento cheese was more than just an appetizer. It was a reminder of how to make the most of what you had and do it with a little style. Pineapple cheese salad sounds like one of those retro recipes that people talk about with equal parts horror and nostalgia, but this sweet and savory mashup was a potluck star once upon a time. You would mix canned pineapple chunks with shredded cheddar cheese and mayonnaise, sometimes tossing in a maraschino cherry on top to seal the deal. It sounds like a strange combination today, but back in the 1950s and 60s, recipes like this came straight out of the old spiral-bound cookbooks tucked in every kitchen drawer. People loved it for its bright, tangy sweetness and how easy it was to throw together with cheap pantry staples. Pineapple cheese salad showed up at luncheons, holiday tables, and potlucks, holding its own next to roast turkey, ham, or casseroles. It might raise a few eyebrows now, but back then, that quirky little salad was a way to dress up a meal and bring something special to the table without spending a fortune. In its day, this strange, creamy creation meant you came prepared. Number 26. Cream of chestnut soup. Before 1910, American chestnut trees covered the eastern half of this country, billions of them. Then the blight came, and within 40 years, nearly everyone was dead. The soup died with the trees. You roasted the chestnuts, peeled them while they were still hot enough to burn your fingers, and simmered them in stock until they broke apart. Then you pressed the whole thing through a sieve and stirred in cream. The flavor was sweet and earthy and unlike anything you have ever tasted from a nut. Old cookbooks from Boston and New York listed chestnut soup as a Thanksgiving starter, the way we list pumpkin pie as dessert. When the trees disappeared, so did the recipe. Number 26. Hash browns and eggs. Diner counters across the Midwest built their breakfast trade on this plate, and the home version was even cheaper because nobody charged you 15 cents for a coffee refill. The potatoes went through a hand grater the night before, sat in cold water to bleed the starch, and got pressed dry in a flour sack towel before they ever met grease. 2 eggs cracked right into the well in the middle of the potato cake, and the lid went on so the whites set without flipping. The plate cost about 11 cents per serving in 1934. Pittsburgh steelworkers ate this before the morning whistle, and farm wives in Iowa served it at 5 in the morning before the chores started. Old Better Homes and Gardens binders ran a version with paprika, but most cooks left it off. Kiffles carried the taste of Eastern European Christmases into American homes, their cream cheese pastry wrapped around fillings of ground walnuts, poppy seeds, or prune lekvar that grandmothers made from scratch. Hungarian, Slovak, and Polish immigrants brought their kifli traditions, adapting recipes to American ingredients while maintaining the crescent shapes that symbolized prosperity. The dough combined cream cheese with butter and flour, creating pastry so tender it threatened to fall apart while being rolled and filled. Each piece was shaped into a small rectangle, spread with filling, then rolled into crescents and curved gently before baking until golden. The walnut filling required grinding nuts fine with sugar and binding with egg white until paste-like. Church bake sales featured kiffles from different families, each version reflecting regional variations that made grandmother's version always best. These cookies connected communities to homelands left behind while celebrating new American lives. Mashed potato casserole turned yesterday's leftovers into tomorrow's Thanksgiving side dish, embodying the waste-nothing philosophy that governed 1960s kitchens and family budgets. Cold mashed potatoes were mixed with a beaten egg to bind them together, spread evenly in a buttered baking dish, and topped with breadcrumbs made from dried bread crust that had been saved throughout the week. The casserole baked until the top turned golden and crispy, while the potatoes underneath stayed creamy and smooth, creating textural contrast that made it more interesting than plain mashed potatoes served fresh. Some cooks added diced onions or grated cheese when available, but the basic version required only potatoes, egg, and crumbs to create something worthy of holiday tables. The dish stretched limited resources by making day-old potatoes feel new and special rather than boring leftovers. Families prepared it the morning of Thanksgiving and baked it while the main dishes cooked, saving precious time and oven space. The soup can omelet was a recipe that showed just how far mid-century cooks would stretch a single egg. The method was simple. Beat eggs, stir in half a can of cream soup, and cook it like a custardy omelet. The soup acted as filler, giving the illusion of more eggs while also adding a creamy texture. It often used cream of mushroom, cream of chicken, or cream of celery, depending on what was available. The result was a heavy, rich omelet that was more casserole than breakfast plate. Families embraced it because eggs could be scarce or expensive, and soup was cheap and plentiful. It was also versatile enough to throw in leftover vegetables or bits of meat. Despite its practicality, the soup can omelet never quite earned lasting affection because it was too dense and bland compared to a normal omelet. By the 1970s, it had mostly disappeared from cookbooks, surviving only as a quirky food memory. Crescent roll taco bake was a recipe that showed how cookbooks in the 1970s were starting to embrace Tex-Mex flavors in family kitchens. Crescent dough was pressed into a baking dish to form a crust filled with seasoned ground beef, beans, or cheese, then topped with more dough to bake into a hearty casserole. The finished dish was both familiar and new, blending the flavors of tacos with the ease of a pie. Families loved how simple it was to stretch ingredients into a meal that could feed everyone, and the novelty made dinner more exciting than usual. For parents, it was a way to introduce new flavors without leaving behind the comfort of dough and cheese that children already loved. Betty Crocker recipes encouraged this kind of playful experimentation, and the taco bake quickly became one of those crossover dishes that bridged tradition with emerging tastes. It was warm, filling, and something that made the whole table feel like they were trying something adventurous together. Oatmeal. Griddle cakes were born from the idea that nothing should go to waste, not even the cold pot of oatmeal left from breakfast. Cookbooks encouraged thrifty cooks to stir in a little flour, baking powder, and milk to form a thick batter that could be spooned onto a hot griddle. Within minutes, you had hearty cakes with a crisp outside and a tender inside. The beauty of this recipe was that it disguised leftovers as something entirely new. Families often topped them with syrup, molasses, or a pat of butter, and suddenly yesterday's porridge became today's satisfying lunch. These cakes were not only quick, but also surprisingly filling, which made them especially appealing during leaner times. For housewives looking to stretch every penny, turning scraps into something warm and comforting was not just resourceful, it was rewarding. This recipe captured that spirit perfectly. Bologna and pickle roll-ups were a popular finger food that highlighted the practicality and humor of American kitchens in the 1950s and 60s. Thin slices of bologna were spread with cream cheese or relish, then rolled tightly and sometimes secured with toothpicks. They were quick to prepare, portable, and perfect for serving at parties, picnics, or casual family snacks. Children loved the salty tang of the pickle paired with the soft meat, while adults appreciated how easy they were to make in large batches. These roll-ups became common in lunchboxes as well, since they could be wrapped and eaten without fuss. They reflected the broader mid-century trend of turning inexpensive ingredients into fun, shareable foods that added personality to gatherings. Though today they might seem more like a novelty than a serious dish, bologna and pickle roll-ups once carried the spirit of convenience and creativity that made American potluck culture thrive. Brown sugar-baked beans were a hearty side dish, featuring slow-cooked beans sweetened with brown sugar and seasoned with spices to create a rich, comforting flavor. This recipe was a common accompaniment at family gatherings, barbecues, and everyday meals, highlighting beans as a nutritious and affordable protein source. The beans were simmered gently with molasses or brown sugar, onions, and sometimes bacon or ham hocks for added depth. The sweetness balanced the earthiness of the beans, making the dish both filling and flavorful. Rooted in Southern cooking traditions, brown sugar-baked beans reflected the importance of beans in African American diets and the ingenuity in seasoning them with pantry staples. Cooking the beans low and slow allowed flavors to meld, producing a dish that could feed large families economically. This recipe also symbolized communal meals and celebrations, where food brought people together around the table. It remains a beloved comfort food with strong ties to cultural identity. Rye bread dressing was a beloved savory side often featured in church cookbooks, reflecting regional traditions where rye bread was a staple. Unlike typical white bread dressings, this version utilized the dense, flavorful rye bread combined with fresh herbs such as sage and thyme, vegetables, and a rich broth to moisten the mixture. The dressing was baked until it developed a crisp golden crust on top while remaining moist inside, delivering a complex taste that balanced earthiness and herbaceous notes. It was a dish that carried the spirit of home and hearth, frequently served alongside roasted meats during holiday suppers or community feasts. Rye bread dressing was also prized for its heartiness and ability to absorb flavors, making it a favorite in congregations with Northern European roots. In many church kitchens, this dressing was more than a side. It was a highlight, sometimes made in large batches to share with neighbors and families. The recipe stood as a delicious example of how simple ingredients could create memorable and meaningful dishes in communal settings. Creamed corn pudding was a creamy, slightly sweet-baked side dish that offered both comfort and affordability to families on a budget. Made from canned or fresh corn combined with milk, eggs, a bit of sugar, and flour or breadcrumbs to thicken, this pudding was baked until golden and set. The creamy texture and natural sweetness of the corn made it appealing even to picky eaters and was a great way to stretch limited fresh vegetables. This dish was a favorite in old Betty Crocker cookbooks, especially during seasons when fresh corn was not available or when rationing made fresh produce scarce. It could be served alongside roasted meats or enjoyed on its own as a satisfying vegetarian option. The recipe was straightforward and used ingredients commonly found in most kitchens, emphasizing ease and economy without sacrificing flavor. Creamed corn pudding was a testament to mid-century home cooking ingenuity, turning humble pantry staples into a dish that felt indulgent and nourishing. Ham salad spread was a quick-to-make mixture that turned leftover cooked ham into a creamy, flavorful filling ideal for crackers or sandwiches. This recipe combined finely chopped ham with mayonnaise and sweet pickle relish, creating a tangy and savory spread that added zest to otherwise plain bread or snack options. It was a favorite in mid-century American homes for its ease and versatility, making use of small amounts of ham that might otherwise be wasted. Perfect for lunches, potlucks, or casual dinners, the spread offered a satisfying protein boost without much effort. The balance of creamy mayo and crunchy relish provided a pleasant texture contrast, keeping the flavor interesting. Ham salad spread was especially prized for its ability to stretch ingredients while still delivering comfort and taste, embodying the resourcefulness typical of the time. Many households passed down their own twists on the recipe, making it a cherished part of family culinary heritage. Celery and walnut salad was a classic side that brought crunch and creaminess together in perfect harmony. Crisp celery stalks were sliced thin and mixed with crunchy walnuts, then tossed in a light mayonnaise or yogurt dressing, creating a refreshing contrast in textures. This salad was often a staple in Betty Crocker cookbooks, celebrated for its ease and the satisfying bite it added to any meal. The cool, slightly bitter celery balanced the rich, buttery walnuts, while the creamy dressing tied it all together with a touch of tang. It was a favored side for holiday dinners and everyday meals alike, offering a healthy option that was still indulgent enough to feel like a treat. The nutty flavor of walnuts brought depth, and the salad's pale green hues added a fresh pop of color to the dinner plate. Its simple yet elegant nature made it beloved by home cooks seeking something light and wholesome to complement heartier mains. Creamed chipped ham on biscuits was the unofficial supper of Pittsburgh, and it had a way of spreading from city kitchens to country church cookbooks. It was made by chopping thin slices of deli ham, usually chipped or shredded, then simmering them in a white sauce of milk, butter, and flour. The sauce was ladled over fresh biscuits, toast, or even saltines depending on what was around. It was salty, creamy, and stuck to your ribs in the best possible way. This meal started as a working-class favorite, especially in mill towns and coal country, but it worked its way into church kitchens too. It was cheap, it was easy to scale up, and it made use of inexpensive lunch meat that could be bought by the pound. During busy weeks with lots of evening programs or youth nights, it was the kind of meal that filled a crock-pot and waited patiently until everyone was done rehearsing or cleaning pews. Church ladies appreciated how little it cost and how much it satisfied. It was also one of those dishes that made leftovers feel like something special, especially when paired with sweet pickles or stewed apples on the side. Hot dog octopus garnish is what happens when creativity meets childhood joy. Mid-century party cookbooks, especially the ones aimed at birthday parties or school lunches, loved a good gimmick, and turning an ordinary hot dog into a smiling octopus? That was peak culinary fun for kids. The trick was simple. Slice one end of a hot dog into strips, boil it for a minute or two, and watch the legs curl outward like tentacles. The result was a goofy, wiggly hot dog that looked like it belonged in a cartoon and tasted like backyard summer. Parents would set them on top of mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, or even tuck them into lunchboxes with a smiley face drawn in mustard. It cost next to nothing but made kids feel like they were eating something special. These octopus dogs became so popular that some cookbooks devoted whole sections to fun food just like it. It was a different kind of food styling, one that made meals exciting without any fuss or frosting. And really, when you are 5 years old, who would not love a sea creature made of meat? Tomato aspic bites are the kind of appetizer that could only come from an era where gelatin ruled the dinner table. You would take seasoned tomato juice, mix it with plain gelatin, let it set until firm, and then slice it into neat little cubes to serve cold with toothpicks. Sounds odd today, but back then, this was considered downright sophisticated, especially when you arranged them on a platter with olives, celery, or pickles. Tomato aspic showed up at luncheons, church socials, and neighborhood gatherings, often clipped straight from community cookbooks with pages curling at the edges. It was part salad, part appetizer, part conversation starter, and completely normal during the mid-century boom of molded foods. The tangy tomato flavor, seasoned with Worcestershire or lemon juice, was refreshing, especially for hot summer get-togethers where you needed something cool and light. People loved it because it looked fancy but cost next to nothing to make, which was always a winning combination for busy households. Scalloped cabbage bake was the kind of side dish that stretched a head of cabbage farther than you thought possible, and it came straight out of those old community cookbooks where frugal comfort food was king. You would slice the cabbage, soften it in boiling water, then bake it in layers with creamy sauce, breadcrumbs, and sometimes a little cheese if you had extra on hand. It sounds simple, but when it came bubbling out of the oven, golden on top and rich underneath, it turned cabbage into pure comfort food. Families leaned on dishes like this during the Great Depression and World War II, when ingredients were scarce and every meal had to go the distance. Scalloped cabbage bake filled plates at church suppers, potlucks, and Sunday dinners all across America, sitting proudly next to ham, roast chicken, or casseroles. It might not win any beauty contests now, but back then it meant a warm, filling meal made with care. In tough times, even the humblest cabbage could be turned into something worth gathering around the table for. Number 25. Beer soup. German immigrants brought beer soup to the Midwest, and for decades it was breakfast. You heated dark beer in a pot with a cinnamon stick and a little sugar, thickened it with a beaten egg and a spoonful of flour stirred into cream, and served it in a bowl with torn bread floating on top. It sounds strange now. It was standard then. Old German-American cookbooks from Milwaukee and Cincinnati printed it alongside oatmeal and porridge as a morning meal because beer was safer to drink than water in many communities and cheaper than coffee. The soup was warm, slightly sweet, and filling enough to carry a farmer through 4 hours of work before his next meal. It disappeared when Prohibition arrived, and after repeal, nobody thought to bring it back. Number 25. Tomato gravy. Southern grandmothers cooked this over a pan of bacon drippings, and the recipe never needed measuring because the ratio lived in their hands. A heaping spoon of flour went into the hot fat first, browned until it smelled like a peanut, and then a quart jar of home-canned tomatoes from the cellar got poured in slow. The whole thing thickened in 4 minutes and went straight over a split biscuit or a cold piece of cornbread. Working families in Alabama and Tennessee ate this for breakfast 3 mornings a week through the 1930s because tomatoes were the one thing the back garden produced in volume. The cost ran under a nickel a serving even at general store prices, and the leftovers got spooned over rice at supper. Date pinwheels represented the kind of careful, multi-step baking that defined serious Christmas preparations in kitchens across America. The filling came first. Chopped dates simmered with sugar, water, and a squeeze of lemon until they collapsed into thick, jammy paste that cooled while the dough was prepared. Brown sugar and butter creamed together with eggs formed the base of a dough rich enough to hold its spiral shape through slicing and baking. The chilled dough was rolled into rectangles, spread with the cooled date filling, then rolled tightly into logs that rested in the icebox until firm enough to slice cleanly. Each thin round revealed the spiral of dark date filling against golden dough, creating cookies as beautiful as they were delicious. Women's magazines featured date pinwheels in December issues throughout the 1950s, their photographs inspiring ambitious home bakers. Today, these spiraled treasures appear rarely, replaced by simpler recipes demanding less time and attention. Green bean vinaigrette replaced expensive green bean casserole on budget-conscious Thanksgiving tables, using simple garden vegetables and pantry staples instead of costly cream and canned soup that strained budgets. Fresh or canned green beans were drained thoroughly and arranged attractively in serving dishes, then dressed generously with a mixture of vinegar, sugar, and salad oil, whisked together with salt and pepper until well blended. Thinly sliced onions were scattered over the top, their sharp flavor mellowing slightly in the acidic dressing as it sat. The result was bright, tangy, and refreshing, cutting through the richness of heavier holiday foods while providing vegetables that families needed for balanced nutrition. The dish could be served cold or at room temperature, eliminating the need for precious oven space or last-minute preparation during the busy holiday cooking rush. A pound of beans dressed with a quarter cup of vinaigrette fed 8 to 10 people as a substantial side dish. Cream of mushroom pizza squares were pitched as sophisticated cocktail party food, but in reality they were little more than pantry snacks dressed up. You started with squares of white bread, spread on a mixture of cream of mushroom soup and shredded cheese, then baked them until golden. The result was a finger food that was crispy, gooey, and surprisingly satisfying for guests nibbling between highballs. They were cheap to make, could be assembled quickly, and felt just fancy enough to serve at parties. This recipe became a hit in suburban entertaining culture because it offered something beyond chips and dip, but did not break the bank. Still, the heavy reliance on canned soup and processed cheese meant it dated quickly as party foods evolved. By the late 20th century, people had moved on to fresher options, and these little squares disappeared from circulation. Today, cream of mushroom pizza squares are remembered as relics of a simpler, entertaining era. Apple pie crescent turnovers were a clever shortcut dessert that let homemakers mimic the flavor of a freshly baked pie without the hours of effort. Instead of rolling out crust from scratch, Canned crescent dough provided a flaky shell for a quick filling of apples, cinnamon, and sugar. The turnovers baked up golden, bubbling slightly at the seams, and filled the house with the unmistakable scent of apple pie. They were smaller and simpler than a traditional pie, making them ideal for everyday family desserts or after-school treats. This was the kind of recipe that mothers could whip up on short notice when children begged for something sweet. It was thrifty too, since canned apple pie filling worked just as well as fresh apples, which saved time and money. Betty Crocker's endorsement made it feel like a trustworthy option, especially for less confident bakers. With every bite, the warm apple filling and flaky crust offered comfort that felt homemade, even if the shortcut was right there in plain sight. Grapefruit halves with brown sugar were a breakfast table staple in the 40s and 50s, and they could not be simpler. Housewives would cut grapefruits in half, loosen the sections with a knife, sprinkle the tops with brown sugar, and place them under the broiler just long enough for the sugar to bubble. In less than 10 minutes, you had a dish that looked elegant, yet cost very little. The bitterness of the grapefruit paired with the sweetness of the caramelized sugar made for a refreshing start to the day. Many cookbooks praised this dish as a healthy option during a time when vitamins were heavily emphasized in advertising and diet culture. It also became popular as a light dessert for luncheons, adding a touch of sophistication without requiring any complicated preparation. With its bright color and quick assembly, this recipe was one of the easiest ways to impress with almost no effort. Cottage cheese with pineapple rings was a simple yet elegant dish that appeared in countless mid-century cookbooks as both a side and a light lunch. A scoop of cottage cheese was often served on a bed of lettuce, topped with a canned pineapple ring, and finished with a bright red maraschino cherry. This dish looked cheerful, was inexpensive, and struck a balance between sweet and savory flavors. It became a staple of lunch counters, school cafeterias, and family dinner tables because it was filling yet refreshing. Housewives appreciated it because it required little effort but felt polished enough for guests. For children, the bright cherry and juicy pineapple made it appealing, even if cottage cheese was not always a favorite. This recipe exemplifies how presentation mattered as much as taste, turning simple ingredients into something that felt special. Though it has largely vanished from modern kitchens, it stands as a reminder of a playful, colorful era of American food. Spiced sweet potato biscuits were fluffy, tender biscuits made by incorporating mashed sweet potatoes and warm spices into classic biscuit dough. This recipe blended the natural sweetness of the potatoes with cinnamon, nutmeg, or allspice to create a flavorful breakfast or side dish unique to African American kitchens. The biscuits were often served alongside savory dishes or enjoyed with butter and honey for a comforting start to the day. Sweet potatoes were a staple crop in the South, prized for their nutrition and versatility, and incorporating them into biscuits was a way to add moisture and flavor while stretching ingredients. The warm spices lent a cozy aroma and taste reminiscent of home cooking and seasonal celebrations. These biscuits showcase the creativity and love embedded in traditional baking, transforming simple pantry items into something special. The recipe remains a treasured link to culinary heritage and continues to inspire modern variations that honor its roots. Scalloped corn was a comforting dish that blended creamy, sweet corn with crunchy breadcrumbs and melted cheese to create a nostalgic favorite found only in old church cookbooks. The layers of creamed corn were carefully poured into a baking dish and topped with buttery breadcrumbs and a sprinkle of cheddar or other cheeses, then baked until golden and bubbling. This dish was often served as either a main or a side at church suppers, offering warmth and familiar flavors that reminded many of home-cooked family dinners. Scalloped corn spoke to a time when convenience met tradition, using canned or fresh corn to stretch meals and satisfy hungry crowds. Its creamy texture, combined with a crisp topping, made it an accessible luxury in many rural and small-town communities. The recipe was easy to scale up for potlucks and fundraisers, which helped maintain its presence in church menus. Today, scalloped corn is a cherished reminder of the resourceful, hearty cooking that sustained congregations through decades of change and challenge. Vegetable hash with leftover meat was a practical and delicious way to turn small scraps into a filling meal. This dish combined diced potatoes and a variety of vegetables such as onions, peppers, or carrots, sautéed together with bits of leftover cooked meat like ham, beef, or chicken. The hash was cooked until the potatoes were crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, while the vegetables softened and the meat added savory depth. This recipe was a favorite for families looking to avoid waste and make the most of every ingredient. It appeared in many mid-century cookbooks under various names and was praised for its flexibility. You could use whatever vegetables or meats you had on hand, making it especially useful during lean times. Served for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, vegetable hash was simple, affordable, and satisfying. It represented the spirit of resourceful cooking that defined budget meals in American kitchens during the 1900s. Microwave potato chips were an ingenious snack that brought the crispy satisfaction of fried potatoes to the kitchen in just minutes. Thin slices of potatoes were arranged on a microwave-safe plate and cooked until they became crisp and golden, offering a homemade alternative to store-bought chips. This recipe was popular because it required minimal oil and preparation time, making it perfect for quick cravings or impromptu gatherings. The ability to customize seasonings, from simple salt to paprika or garlic powder, made it versatile for different tastes. Microwave potato chips became a hit in households seeking convenience without sacrificing the joy of a crunchy snack. Unlike traditional frying, this method was seen as cleaner and quicker, fitting the post-war American lifestyle that increasingly valued speed and practicality. It reminded many of the creativity that home cooks embrace to adapt to new appliances and changing times. Baked sweet potato fries were a popular twist on the classic potato side, offering a sweet and savory alternative that baked to crispy perfection. Thinly sliced sweet potatoes were tossed in seasonings, often cinnamon, salt, or paprika, and baked until tender on the inside and slightly crisp on the edges. This healthier option appeared in many Betty Crocker cookbooks as a way to enjoy fries without deep frying, perfect for families seeking convenience and flavor. The natural sweetness of the potatoes paired beautifully with the warm spices, creating a comforting side that complemented both casual meals and special dinners. Baked sweet potato fries were easy to prepare and could be customized with various seasoning blends, making them versatile for many tastes. Their vibrant orange color brightened the plate, and the satisfying crunch made them a hit with kids and adults alike. These fries were a testament to how a simple vegetable could be transformed into a crowd-pleasing side that brought both nostalgia and a fresh twist to the table. Eggplant hamburger pie was what happened when church ladies leaned into garden vegetables and budget beef at the same time. You would slice the eggplant thin and use it like a crust or a layer inside a pie dish, then spoon in a seasoned mix of ground beef, onion, and tomato. Some versions added breadcrumbs or a little shredded cheese on top before baking. The end result was something between a casserole and a meat pie, rich, saucy, and surprisingly light. Eggplant was never the star of church dinners, but in the right hands it carried a lot of weight. It was cheap, it soaked up flavor, and it came straight from backyard gardens during summer months. This dish was especially popular in regions with Italian or Greek congregations where Mediterranean cooking naturally found its way into church kitchens. But even in Midwest cookbooks, eggplant hamburger pie made appearances as a clever, meat-stretching recipe that helped families get through a week. It was earthy and satisfying, not too heavy, and it gave women a reason to use what they had grown without spending extra. For families who did not eat out much, this was as close as it got to something special. Gelatin mold leftover savor might sound like a punishment today, but back then it was a point of pride. Once gelatin became affordable and easy to prepare, people found all kinds of ways to use it, especially as a vessel to stretch meals and make use of leftovers. You had a little ham, some canned peas, a scoop of last night's macaroni salad. Mix it all into lemon or tomato gelatin and pour it into a mold. Chill, unmold, and suddenly you had a centerpiece. It was cold. It was colorful. It was the future, or so they said. These savory gelatin molds were featured everywhere from homemaker magazines to government-sponsored nutrition guides. They promised frugality, beauty, and innovation all in one jiggly dish. Housewives with limited means could make a full meal look polished and party-ready. People even had specific molds for specific meals. Rings, domes, fish shapes, you name it. It may not have always tasted great, but it looked impressive. And that counted for something. Somewhere between waste, not, and show-off, gelatin found its niche. Hot cheese olive balls were the perfect little party trick hiding in those old spiral-bound cookbooks your grandmother probably kept in a kitchen drawer. You would wrap salty green olives in cheesy dough, pop them in the oven, and out came these golden, flaky bites with a gooey center and a briny surprise inside. They were strange, addictive, and absolutely everywhere at vintage cocktail parties and family get-togethers. You could make a whole tray with barely any ingredients, just flour, butter, cheese, and a jar of olives, and still impress a room full of guests. That was the genius of old cookbook recipes. They were built for tight budgets, but never felt skimpy. The combination of sharp cheddar and salty olives was bold for the time, but it made these snacks unforgettable. They looked fancy, tasted indulgent, and disappeared fast, especially if you left them on the table next to a punch bowl. Somewhere along the way, they vanished from party menus, but back in the day, nothing said you had your act together like a platter of hot cheese olive balls straight from the oven. 3 bean molded salad was one of those curious creations from vintage cookbooks that made vegetables and gelatin collide in the strangest way. You would take the classic 3-bean salad, green beans, wax beans, kidney beans, and suspend the whole thing in lemon or lime-flavored gelatin, set it in a mold, and proudly serve it at potlucks or family dinners. Back in the 1950s and 60s, molded salads were a rite of passage in every community cookbook, and this one was no different. It looked fancy, stretched pantry staples, and made sure not a single bean went to waste. People loved it for the bright colors, wobbly texture, and how it sat proudly next to roast meats or casseroles. It might sound a little off-putting now, but back then, molded salads were considered practical and even impressive. This one in particular packed protein, vegetables, and a little retro flair all in one strange, shimmering dish. You might not see it outside of vintage recipe cards today, but once upon a time, it was the talk of every potluck. Number 24. Mock turtle soup. Real turtle soup was expensive. A whole snapping turtle cost money and effort, and most home cooks wanted nothing to do with butchering one. So mock turtle soup was invented as the affordable version. You used a calf's head. You simmered it for hours with onions, cloves, allspice, and a splash of Madeira wine until the broth turned dark and rich. Hard-boiled eggs went in at the end, sliced thin because they looked like turtle eggs floating in the bowl. Mock turtle soup appears in nearly every American cookbook printed between 1850 and 1930. It was served at formal dinners and hotel banquets. The moment Americans stopped eating calf's head, the soup vanished from every table it had ever sat on. Number 24. Ham loaf. Pennsylvania Dutch kitchens turned the ragged ends of a smoked ham into this dense brown loaf, and the trick was to grind the ham fine with fresh pork shoulder at a 1-to-1 ratio. Crushed soda crackers, 2 beaten eggs, and a cup of whole milk held the grind together, and a thick glaze of brown sugar, cider vinegar, and ground cloves went over the top before it baked at 350 degrees. The whole loaf cost about 35 cents to assemble in 1938 and fed 6 people with thick slices left for cold sandwiches the next day. Lancaster County Church cookbooks ran 3 different versions on the same printed page, each one swearing the others were wrong about the vinegar ratio. Better Homes and Gardens kept the recipe in the binder through 1962 and then quietly dropped it from the next reprint. Fruitcake cookies condensed all the flavors of traditional holiday fruitcake into individual treats that could be enjoyed without commitment to an entire loaf. These dense, chewy cookies packed candied cherries, citron, pineapple, and raisins into a brown sugar batter enriched with bourbon or brandy that deepened during storage. The fruit was chopped fine and often soaked overnight in spirits that plumped the raisins and softened the candied pieces. Pecans or walnuts added crunch against the sticky sweetness, while spices like cinnamon and nutmeg provided warmth. Dropped by spoonfuls onto baking sheets, they spread slightly into irregular mounds that emerged from ovens fragrant and glistening. Families who appreciated fruitcake but found whole loaves excessive embraced these cookies as the perfect compromise. They aged beautifully in tins, the flavors melding over weeks until Christmas Day brought them out for visitors. Fruitcake cookies carried tradition forward in manageable bites. Cranberry fluff stretched expensive fresh cranberries into a colorful dessert salad that fed crowds while costing only pennies per serving for 1960s Thanksgiving celebrations. A small package of fresh cranberries was ground through a hand-crank meat grinder along with one whole orange peel and all, creating a tart, chunky mixture that was both bright and flavorful. This base was sweetened generously with sugar and mixed thoroughly with miniature marshmallows that had been purchased on sale after Halloween, along with whatever canned fruit happened to be cheapest at the grocery store that week. The mixture was folded together gently and chilled overnight in the refrigerator, allowing the flavors to meld together while the marshmallows softened into the cranberry mixture, creating a fluffy, cloud-like texture. The result was sweet, tart, and fluffy all at once, with little bursts of fruit throughout and enough vibrant color to make it look festive and special on holiday tables. Soup-stuffed meat rings were a clever but unusual way to stretch ground beef into something that felt bigger than it really was. The recipe had you form beef into donut-shaped rings, spoon condensed soup into the center, and then bake until the whole thing set. Sometimes mashed potatoes were piped around the edges to make it look more appealing. Families loved the visual trick because it looked like a hearty centerpiece while really being very frugal. The soup filling usually doubled as both flavor and sauce, making each slice of meat ring taste like a full dinner. This was the kind of recipe that filled community cookbooks during the 1950s because it maximized every bit of meat while keeping costs down. Still, the odd shape and texture never made it a long-lasting favorite. As beef became more affordable and tastes shifted, the soup-stuffed meat ring quietly vanished from American kitchens. Pigs in a blanket with crescent dough were an enduring party favorite that worked just as well at bridge clubs as they did at game day gatherings. Small sausages or cocktail franks were wrapped in triangles of dough, then baked until the pastry puffed up and turned golden brown. They were bite-sized, easy to grab, and impossible to stop eating once the tray was on the table. The contrast of buttery crust and savory sausage made them both addictive and comforting. These little bites showed up in countless Betty Crocker cookbooks and were advertised as perfect solutions for casual entertaining. They were affordable too, which meant hosts could make large platters without spending much. Children adored them, adults appreciated their simplicity, and they became one of those recipes that felt timeless. Even now, pigs in a blanket carry the charm of a snack that never really left the American table, even if it began decades earlier in mid-century kitchens. Quick escalloped tomatoes was one of those recipes that appeared in nearly every community cookbook because of its low cost and speed. The instructions were straightforward. Open a can of tomatoes, stir them with breadcrumbs, butter, and a pinch of sugar, then bake them just until hot and bubbling. In 10 minutes flat, you had a side dish that stretched canned goods into something hearty and flavorful. Families served it alongside meats or with slices of bread, and it quickly became a way to make canned vegetables feel more like a proper meal. The texture of soft tomatoes and crunchy crumbs gave it appeal, while the butter made it feel more indulgent than it really was. For many households, this was the kind of recipe that bridged the gap between practicality and comfort, proving that even with limited ingredients, flavor could still shine. Saltine cracker pizza was a playful makeshift recipe that many children of the 1960s and 70s still remember fondly. Made by topping saltine crackers with ketchup or tomato sauce and shredded cheese, then broiling them for a few minutes, it was the ultimate quick snack. It offered the taste of pizza without the time or expense, making it a favorite among busy parents and resourceful kids. The crisp saltine base, gooey cheese, and tangy sauce came together in a way that felt indulgent, even though it was incredibly simple. Families often made them as after-school treats or late-night snacks, and they became a common recipe in community cookbooks that celebrated quick, thrifty meals. While today it might be dismissed as too basic, saltine cracker pizza was beloved for its creativity and the joy it brought to children who felt like they were eating something special. It was proof that even the humblest ingredients could be turned into comfort food. Turkey neck soup was a nourishing broth-based soup made using flavorful turkey necks simmered with root vegetables and herbs to create a rich, hearty meal. This soup made use of often overlooked parts of the turkey, reflecting a tradition of resourcefulness and respect for the whole animal. The necks were slowly cooked until tender, releasing deep flavors into the broth that was both warming and sustaining. Root vegetables like carrots, onions, and potatoes added body and nutrition, making the soup a filling choice especially in colder months. Popular in African American households, this recipe symbolized thriftiness and culinary skill, turning inexpensive cuts into delicious meals. The soup was commonly served with cornbread or rice and was a staple at family tables during gatherings and everyday dinners alike. Its enduring popularity speaks to a legacy of making the most of what was available while creating comforting, flavorful food. Chicken divan casserole was a mid-century potluck favorite that found a special place in church supper traditions. This creamy casserole combined tender-cooked chicken with broccoli florets, all smothered in a rich cheese sauce before being baked to perfection. Its appeal lay in its comforting blend of protein and vegetables, making it both filling and nourishing. The dish often included ingredients like mayonnaise or cream of mushroom soup to achieve the desired creaminess, showcasing the popular convenience foods of the time. Chicken divan was especially popular in community meals because it could be made ahead and served warm or at room temperature, ideal for large groups. The casserole reflected a shift towards more elaborate dishes in church cookbooks, incorporating newer food products while still emphasizing affordability and shareability. Its widespread popularity made it a staple on church tables across America, symbolizing the growing influence of convenience cooking blended with traditional values of hospitality and fellowship. Vegetable loaf, also known as meatless meatloaf, was a creative way to enjoy a comforting classic without using expensive meat. This loaf combined grated or finely chopped vegetables such as carrots, zucchini, and onions with grains like rice or breadcrumbs to bind the mixture. Eggs or milk were added to hold it all together before baking the mixture into a firm, sliceable loaf. Seasonings and herbs were used to enhance flavor, making the dish tasty enough to stand on its own or to accompany a simple sauce or gravy. Vegetable loaf was a popular recipe in old Betty Crocker cookbooks, because it offered an affordable, nutritious alternative during times when meat was scarce or costly. It was often served as a main dish with potatoes or steamed greens, providing both comfort and sustenance. This recipe reflected mid-century home cooks' ingenuity in creating meatless meals that felt satisfying and wholesome without straining the household budget. Gingerbread mug cake brought the warmth and spice of traditional gingerbread into a fast, single-serving treat that anyone could prepare in minutes. This recipe used common pantry spices such as ginger, cinnamon, and cloves combined with basic ingredients to create a moist and flavorful cake cooked directly in a mug using the microwave. Its quick preparation made it ideal for satisfying sudden dessert cravings without the weight or cleanup of a full cake. The mug cake embodied the charm of vintage baking with a modern twist, preserving the nostalgic flavors while adapting to busy lifestyles. It became especially popular during the holidays or cold months when the scent of gingerbread evoked comfort and tradition. This recipe offered a personal-sized indulgence, reminding many that sweetness did not have to come from lengthy or complicated cooking to be truly satisfying. Spinach and mushroom casserole was a hearty vegetable side that brought comfort and creaminess to the dinner table. Tender spinach and earthy mushrooms were baked together in a rich, creamy sauce, often thickened with cheese or cream of mushroom soup, creating a luscious dish with layers of flavor. Betty Crocker cookbooks frequently featured this casserole as a crowd-pleasing accompaniment to roasts or holiday meals, appreciated for turning humble vegetables into something indulgent and satisfying. The mushrooms added a meaty texture that balanced the tender spinach, while the creamy sauce wrapped everything in warmth and richness. This casserole could be prepared ahead of time and baked just before serving, making it a convenient option for busy home cooks. Its combination of fresh greens and deep mushroom flavors made it a staple in kitchens longing for both nutrition and comfort. The golden top, sometimes sprinkled with breadcrumbs or extra cheese, gave it an inviting crust that made it hard to resist. Bacon-topped tomato pie was one of those strange little miracles that somehow felt fancy and frugal all at once. At its core, it was sliced tomatoes, sometimes fresh from the garden, sometimes canned, layered into a pie crust with mayonnaise, shredded cheese, and a touch of onion. On top went a lattice or crumble of bacon, the kind you saved and froze in wax paper until you had enough. Then it baked until everything melted together in a warm, bubbling mess that smelled like Sunday supper. This dish was especially beloved in Southern church cookbooks, where tomatoes were plentiful and bacon was considered a sacred ingredient. Women's auxiliaries made it for luncheons, potlucks, and summer picnics when it was too hot to cook anything heavier. It walked the line between a side dish and a main course, good enough to carry a meal if needed. Sometimes it had biscuit crusts, sometimes store-bought dough, but it always had that creamy, salty sweet thing going for it. It might not have looked elegant on the plate, but people went back for seconds. That was usually all the proof a church lady needed to call it a hit. Salt-rubbed chicken skin crisping is one of those old-school tricks you try once and wonder why you ever stopped. Before nonstick pans and convection ovens, getting crispy skin was a real feat. One of the simplest ways to get there? Salt. Not a pinch, but a full rub down with coarse salt, left overnight in the fridge. It drew out moisture, dried the skin, and left it ready to blister and brown. You could add garlic or herbs if you had them, but you really did not need to. The trick worked best on whole chickens or thighs with the skin on. When it came out right, the skin cracked like a chip and packed serious flavor. Cookbooks from the 1940s through the 1970s praised it under crispy chicken secrets and roast tips. It took a little planning, sure, but the reward was worth it. And best of all, it cost nothing. Canned Vienna. Sausage canapés were the appetizer you pulled together when payday was still a week away, but you wanted to show up with something. You would open a can of those soft little sausages, slice them up, and stack them on crackers with a dab of mustard, cheese, or relish, whatever you had in the fridge. It sounds humble now, but back then, that little plate of canapés meant you made an effort, even when the pantry was running low. Vienna sausages were cheap, easy to store, and a staple in homes where stretching meals was just how you lived. You saw them at school events, potlucks, and family gatherings, where every dish told a story of making the most with what you had. Those little sausage bites filled bellies, fueled conversations, and kept parties going on a dime. They might have disappeared as fancier snacks took over, but anyone who grew up on them remembers how proud you felt bringing a full tray of appetizers to the table, even if they came straight from a can. Buttered parsley potatoes were the kind of humble, forgotten side dish that quietly filled plates and satisfied appetites across America, especially during lean times. You would boil small baby potatoes, toss them in butter, sprinkle with chopped parsley, and serve them up next to roast beef, fried chicken, or whatever you had on the table that night. It was not flashy, but back in the day, that was the whole point. Simple, affordable, filling, and easy to dress up with ingredients straight from your garden or pantry. You would find recipes like this tucked in the pages of faded cookbooks from the 1930s to the 70s, passed along at potlucks and family dinners. Buttered parsley potatoes were proof that you did not need much to make a side dish feel complete. They soaked up gravy, balanced out heavier meals, and stretched your groceries farther when money was tight. These days, they have slipped off most dinner tables, but back then, a bowl of buttery potatoes meant you brought comfort, simplicity, and just a little bit of pride to the meal. Number 23. Cream of lettuce soup. Nobody makes lettuce soup today, but open a cookbook from before 1940 and you will find it. You took a whole head of lettuce, usually the outer leaves that were too wilted for salad, chopped them rough, and simmered them in broth until they went soft. Then you pressed everything through a sieve, stirred in cream and butter, and served it warm with a pinch of white pepper. The taste was mild and green, closer to garden water than to anything you would recognize as soup. Old cookbooks listed it as an elegant first course, the kind of thing a hostess served at a luncheon when she wanted to seem refined without spending much. The lettuce cost almost nothing, and neither did the effort. Number 23, hominy casserole. Texas and Oklahoma kitchens leaned hard on this one because a 5-pound bag of dried hominy ran 19 cents at the general store, and one bag stretched across 2 full weeks of suppers. Cooks soaked the dried kernels overnight in cold salted water, drained them in the morning, and then simmered them with a smoked ham hock and a bay leaf all afternoon on the back of the wood stove. The soft hominy layered into a deep baking dish with sharp cheddar and a tin of canned green chilies, and a splash of evaporated milk went over the top before it slid into the oven. The whole casserole came out hot and creamy and tasted bigger than its 23-cent price tag suggested, which is exactly what tired farm families needed in 1936. Better Homes and Gardens dropped the recipe from the 1965 reprint, and it never came back. Bourbon balls appeared on crystal platters at grown-up Christmas gatherings, their boozy sweetness reserved for those old enough to appreciate spirits in confection form. These no-bake treats combined crushed vanilla wafers with cocoa, powdered sugar, and enough bourbon to create a dough that could be rolled into balls and coated in additional sugar. The alcohol was never cooked away, leaving each bite with warming heat that spread through the chest and brought roses to cheeks. Some recipes called for corn syrup to bind everything together. Others relied on bourbon alone to create the right texture. The balls aged in refrigerators for days, the bourbon mellowing while the cookie crumbs absorbed moisture and transformed from gritty to smooth. Ladies' groups made these for holiday parties, understanding that certain traditions belonged to adults. Children were told these were special cookies not meant for them, only increasing their mystery and allure. Bourbon balls represented sophisticated holiday indulgence. Biscuit rolls replaced expensive yeast rolls on Thanksgiving tables, using quick biscuit dough shaped into elegant crescents that looked festive and special despite costing almost nothing to prepare. Flour, baking powder, salt, and lard were cut together with a pastry blender until the mixture resembled coarse crumbs. Then just enough milk was added to form soft dough that could be rolled out thin on floured kitchen counters. The dough was cut carefully into triangles, rolled up tightly from the wide end toward the point, and curved gently into crescent shapes before being placed on baking sheets and baked until golden brown and puffed. The rolls emerged from the oven hot and flaky, their buttery layers pulling apart easily when broken open at the table, steam rising from the soft interior. Families brushed them immediately with melted margarine while still warm, creating an attractive shine and adding richness that made them look more expensive than they actually were. Upside-down tomato pie was a Campbell's spin on the popular upside-down dessert trend of the mid-century. Instead of pineapple or cake, this recipe featured a savory pie where the filling was condensed tomato soup and vegetables topped with pastry dough. You baked it crust side up, then flipped it over to serve. The result was a savory pie that looked novel and was often used as a conversation piece at dinners. It was affordable and easy since the soup base took care of seasoning and moisture. While clever in design, it never really won hearts. The texture was soggy, the flavor overly tangy, and the flipping process often ended in a mess. Still, for a time, it embodied the playful spirit of Campbell's cookbooks, which leaned heavily on gimmicks and novelty. Upside-down tomato pie disappeared from print after a few years, but remains one of the strangest vanished experiments. Crescent roll cherry cheese. Danish gave homemakers a way to create a bakery-style pastry without needing a professional oven or hours of kneading. By layering crescent dough with cream cheese filling and topping it with canned cherry pie filling, the result was a sweet, creamy, and slightly tangy dessert. The crescent dough baked into a flaky crust that held everything together, giving the illusion of a carefully crafted pastry. These were often served at brunches, showers, or holiday breakfasts when hosts wanted to impress without breaking their backs in the kitchen. Betty Crocker cookbooks emphasized recipes like this because they combined convenience with elegance, making ordinary home cooks feel like they could present something special. The glossy red cherries and creamy center made the dish look festive and appealing. Families who made this often remembered it as one of those recipes that made gatherings feel elevated even when times were modest. It was a dish that could make an ordinary morning feel like a celebration. Mock apple pie with crackers was one of the most clever Depression-era tricks to ever appear in print. When apples were scarce or expensive, cooks would take soda crackers, sugar, water, cinnamon, and lemon juice to recreate the flavor and texture of apple filling. The crackers softened in the syrupy mixture and remarkably resembled tender apple slices once baked. Covered with a simple pie crust, the result looked and tasted enough like real apple pie that many guests never suspected the difference. Best of all, it could be made in about 10 minutes of active work, since the filling came together on the stovetop in no time. Cookbooks praised it as a marvel of resourcefulness, and it became a household favorite during times when true fruit pies were out of reach. Few recipes show the ingenuity of old cookbooks better than this one. Egg and vinegar. Dressing salad was a straightforward recipe that brought together everyday staples in a tangy, filling way. Hard-boiled eggs were quickly chopped and mixed with vinegar, mayonnaise, and sometimes mustard, creating a creamy yet sharp dressing. This was spooned over lettuce, cabbage, or even bread, making it a versatile dish that could serve as either a salad or sandwich filling. It was quick to prepare, nutritious, and inexpensive, which made it especially appealing for families trying to stretch their groceries. The vinegar gave it a brightness that balanced the richness of the mayonnaise, while the eggs provided protein and substance. It often appeared in small-town cookbooks and homemaking guides, praised for being both practical and tasty. While it may sound simple, it reflected the mid-century love of efficient recipes that relied on pantry basics. Egg and vinegar dressing salad may have slipped out of style, but it remains a telling example of how thrift shaped everyday meals. Sweet potato and black-eyed pea salad was a refreshing cold dish that combined two classic Southern staples tossed in a tangy, flavorful dressing. This salad celebrated the natural sweetness of roasted or boiled sweet potatoes paired with the earthy taste and firm texture of black-eyed peas. Often enhanced with chopped onions, bell peppers, and herbs, the dish balanced hearty ingredients with bright acidity from vinegar or citrus-based dressings. It was a practical yet delicious way to enjoy familiar ingredients in a new form, often served during warmer months or at potlucks. Rooted in African-American culinary traditions, this salad reflected the blending of nutrition and flavor, honoring the cultural importance of both sweet potatoes and black-eyed peas. Its vibrant colors and textures made it a favorite side dish, symbolizing community gatherings and family meals. The recipe offers a fresh take on heritage foods while maintaining deep ties to the past. Baked salmon loaf was a classic fish-based entree that appeared frequently in old church cookbooks, prized for its ease of preparation and satisfying flavor. Made by combining flaked canned or fresh salmon with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings, the mixture was shaped into a loaf and baked until firm and golden. This dish was often served cold, sliced for sandwiches or platters, but could also be enjoyed warm as a main course. Baked salmon loaf offered a practical way to stretch limited fish supplies while providing essential nutrients, fitting well with the frugal mindset of church kitchens. The loaf was usually accompanied by simple sauces such as tartar or lemon butter to enhance its taste. It was a popular choice during Lent or other fasting periods when meat was avoided, ensuring congregations could enjoy hearty meals without breaking religious observances. Baked salmon loaf remains a nostalgic reminder of the adaptability and creativity found in communal cooking traditions. Potato and onion frittata was a budget-friendly egg casserole combining inexpensive ingredients to make a filling and nutritious dish. Eggs were beaten and mixed with diced or grated potatoes and sautéed onions, then baked or cooked slowly on the stovetop until set. The potatoes added heartiness and bulk, while onions provided sweetness and flavor. This dish was easy to prepare and used staple pantry ingredients that were often on hand, making it a popular choice for families trying to maximize limited food supplies. The frittata could be served hot or cold, making it versatile for meals throughout the day. Its simplicity and adaptability meant home cooks could add herbs or leftover cheese if available, but it did not depend on any special or costly ingredients. Potato and onion frittata appeared in many vintage cookbooks as a practical meal solution during difficult economic times, embodying the resourceful and comforting nature of budget cooking. Macaroni salad was a picnic classic that found its way into countless American cookouts and family gatherings thanks to its simplicity and fresh flavor. This cold pasta salad combined cooked macaroni with mayonnaise, diced celery, onions, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs or pickles, creating a creamy and crunchy dish that was both filling and refreshing. Its ease of preparation and ability to be made ahead made it a favorite in homes and community events alike. Macaroni salad represented the kind of casual, crowd-pleasing side that paired well with barbecues, sandwiches, and fried foods common in mid-century America. Its versatility also allowed families to adjust ingredients based on what was available, making it economical as well as tasty. For many, this dish is deeply tied to warm weather memories and outdoor meals shared with friends and family. Cheese and pineapple skewers were a fun and flavorful appetizer side that perfectly blended sweet and savory notes. Cubed cheese, often cheddar or a mild American variety, was paired with juicy pineapple chunks on toothpicks, creating bite-sized delights that were both refreshing and rich. This combination featured prominently in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a party favorite and an easy-to-prepare hors d'oeuvre. The sharpness of the cheese contrasted with the tropical sweetness of the pineapple, making every bite a balanced explosion of flavors. These skewers were popular at potlucks, holiday gatherings, and casual get-togethers, offering a colorful and attractive option that was simple yet sophisticated. The ease of assembly made them a go-to for hosts wanting to impress without fuss. Their combination of textures, creamy cheese and juicy fruit, made for an unexpectedly delightful treat that could easily double as a side dish or a snack. Rice ring with creamed mushrooms was the kind of supper dish that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover, but came from a 5-ingredient recipe in the back of a spiral-bound church cookbook. You would mold cooked rice, flavored with butter and maybe a bouillon cube, into a ring using a bundt pan or gelatin mold. Then you would fill the center with creamed mushrooms made from a simple white sauce and canned or fresh mushrooms sautéed in butter. It held its shape, looked impressive, and tasted warm and earthy. Dishes like this were popular for Sunday socials and women's luncheons, where the goal was to serve something filling that still had a little flair. Church ladies knew presentation mattered, especially when the ingredients were plain. Rice was cheap, mushrooms could be foraged or bought in bulk, and butter made everything feel a bit more special. This was a dish that traveled well, reheated easily, and made just enough fuss to feel intentional without being fussy. You could feed a dozen people without breaking a sweat, or your grocery budget. And if there was any left, it was even better the next day. Whipped evaporated milk for desserts was the poor man's whipped cream, and for some it tasted even better. It came in a can, sat on the shelf for months, and was far cheaper than real cream. To make it work, you chilled the can, poured the thick milk into a bowl, and whipped it hard. Some added sugar or vanilla, but it held its shape without much help. It was not as rich as real cream, but it held firm and had a clean, milky flavor. People used it in mousses, icebox cakes, and pies that needed lift without weight. It popped up in retro cookbooks as a budget topping or emergency fix. During rationing or tight weeks, it was a go-to solution. And for families who grew up with it, the taste still brings back birthdays, bake sales, and simple Sunday treats. Radish roses and veggie trays were the edible art that turned up at every potluck, shower, or holiday dinner when someone wanted to make the vegetable tray look extra special. You would take crisp radishes, slice them just right, soak them in ice water, and watch them bloom into delicate little rose shapes. Paired with celery sticks, carrot curls, and maybe a few olives, it turned plain old vegetables into a centerpiece worthy of the church basement or community hall. It was simple, budget-friendly, and gave off that feeling that someone took the time to make things look nice, even when groceries were stretched thin. Old cookbooks were full of instructions for radish roses and other vegetable carving tricks, And if you had a steady hand, you could turn a plain platter into something worth talking about. Over time, the art of vegetable trays faded, replaced by store-bought dips and pre-cut carrots that never looked half as nice. But for those who remember them, radish roses were not just food. They were proof that even the simplest ingredients could be turned into something beautiful. Golden Glow carrot salad was one of those bright, zesty side dishes that added color and crunch to dinner tables, especially when meals were built around whatever you could grow or stretch from the pantry. You would take shredded carrots, mix them with lemon-flavored gelatin, and fold in crushed pineapple for sweetness, letting the whole thing set into a glossy, citrusy mold that practically glowed on the plate. It sounds unusual now, but back then, molded salads were a potluck favorite, and this one stood out for its bold color and refreshing bite. Families leaned on recipes like this because it was affordable, easy to throw together, and made even the humblest meals feel a little more special. Golden Glow carrot salad showed up at Sunday suppers, holiday spreads, and backyard picnics, sitting proudly next to roast chicken, casseroles, or fried pork chops. It stretched ingredients, added brightness to heavy plates, and gave meals that cheerful, homemade touch. You hardly see it now, but once upon a time, this glowing salad was a quiet symbol of kitchen creativity and making do with simple, practical ingredients. Number 22. Egg drop soup. Long before Chinese restaurants made egg drop soup famous in America, home cooks had their own version. Old cookbooks called it egg soup or stracciatella, depending on who your grandmother was. You brought a pot of good broth to a rolling boil, beat an egg with a fork, and poured it in slowly while stirring. The egg set in thin ribbons and threads that floated through the broth like lace. Italian families stirred grated cheese into the egg before pouring. German cooks added a splash of vinegar. Some Appalachian versions used nothing but water, salt, and the egg itself. The whole thing took 3 minutes and cost almost nothing. It was the soup you made when there was nothing in the house but eggs, and it was better than it had any right to. Number 22. Salmon loaf. The Alaska Packers Association handed out a little pamphlet at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair called How to Eat Canned Salmon, and 3 of the recipes inside were variations on this same loaf, which is how the dish entered American kitchens in the first place. The cook drained a tall can of pink salmon, picked out the round backbone with a fork because grandmothers always insisted, and mashed the fish into a bowl with crushed soda crackers, 1 beaten egg, half a cup of evaporated milk, and a spoon of yellow mustard. The whole mixture pressed into a loaf pan, baked at 350 degrees for 40 minutes, and came out the color of clay tile with a firm, sliceable crumb. A can of salmon ran 15 cents in 1934. The crackers were a nickel, and the egg cost a penny. So a loaf that fed 6 people landed under 25 cents. The dish carried more than economics. Catholic families ate it on Fridays during Lent because it was meatless under the rules of the time. Government nutrition pamphlets pushed it into Tennessee and Kentucky schools, prisons, and county hospitals because a can of salmon combined with cornbread and a bowl of beans delivered enough niacin to keep pellagra out of a family of 4 for the whole week. The loaf showed up cold on Saturday lunch plates, warm on Sunday supper tables, and chopped into sandwich filling for Monday's school lunchbox. By 1968, the recipe vanished from the glossy magazine cookbooks because canned tuna replaced it in the cultural memory, but the page lived on inside the wire-bound church cookbooks in Birmingham and Knoxville, where the working mothers still wrote in the margins. The loaf was never glamorous and never tried to be, and that is exactly why it carried 3 generations through the worst stretches of the century. Divinity Drops brought southern sweetness to Christmas cookie platters, their cloud-like texture achieved through careful candy-making technique that intimidated timid bakers. These weren't true cookies, but confections, sugar syrup boiled to hardball stage, then beaten into stiff egg whites until the mixture transformed into glossy peaks that could be dropped onto waxed paper. Pecans or walnuts folded through added richness and crunch against the melt-away sweetness of the candy base. The process demanded precision. Humidity could ruin an entire batch, and undercooking left sticky puddles instead of firm peaks. Southern grandmothers knew the weather mattered. choosing dry winter days for divinity making and refusing to attempt it when rain threatened. The finished drops sat in fluted paper cups, their swirled tops catching light. Holiday gift boxes often included divinity alongside fudge and pralines. The skill required meant divinity making passed from mother to daughter through demonstration, not written recipe. Sweet potato pudding transformed the year's cheapest and most abundant vegetable into Thanksgiving dessert that satisfied sweet cravings without requiring expensive sugar or fancy ingredients that strained family budgets. Boiled sweet potatoes were mashed until completely smooth and mixed thoroughly with beaten eggs. A small amount of sugar or molasses for sweetness, ground cinnamon for warmth, and enough milk to create a pudding consistency that would set properly when baked. The mixture was poured carefully into buttered baking dishes and baked in moderate ovens until set firm and lightly browned on top, filling kitchens throughout the neighborhood with the spicy sweetness of cinnamon and caramelizing sugars. The pudding could be served warm, straight from the oven, or cooled and served cold the next day, either plain or topped with a small dollop of whipped cream if the budget allowed such luxury. Sweet potatoes cost only pennies per pound in the 1960s markets. Soup gel. O-cubes were one of the most notorious experiments to come out of mid-century Campbell's recipe books. They combined unflavored gelatin with beef or vegetable consommé, creating firm cubes of savory jelly that could be served as salads or appetizers. The logic was that gelatin molds were fashionable and soup could be a shortcut to flavor. The result, however, was off-putting to most. They wobbled like a dessert, but tasted like cold broth, confusing the senses of anyone who tried them. Some versions added chopped vegetables or meats inside, which only made them stranger. These were heavily marketed as elegant buffet fare but never really caught on outside a handful of adventurous households. While gelatin salads with fruit or sweet fillings thrived, the savory soup versions quickly faded into obscurity. Today, soup gel O-cubes are often mentioned in lists of the oddest vintage foods, and for good reason. Crescent veggie wreath was a festive appetizer that took advantage of the flexible nature of crescent dough. The dough was arranged in a circular pattern, baked into a ring, then topped with a spread of cream cheese and fresh vegetables to resemble a holiday wreath. It was colorful, eye-catching, and a lighter option compared to many heavier dishes on buffet tables. This recipe reflected how mid-century entertaining leaned on creativity and presentation just as much as taste. Families enjoyed making it together during the holidays because decorating the wreath with peppers, carrots, or broccoli felt playful. It became a centerpiece dish that was as much about bringing cheer as feeding guests. Betty Crocker cookbooks encouraged recipes like this because they combined practicality with charm, giving homemakers confidence that their party tables would impress. Even those who did not celebrate holidays in a traditional sense found reasons to make it for potlucks or seasonal events. It turned something as simple as dough and vegetables into a conversation starter. Jell-O whip salad was a mid-century sensation that turned a box of gelatin into something creamy and light in almost no time at all. Housewives would prepare the gelatin, let it partially set, and then whip it together with chilled evaporated milk until it became fluffy. The result was a pastel-colored salad that could be dressed up with fruit or served plain. It was inexpensive, fun to look at, and quick enough to prepare for any gathering. Many cookbooks encouraged it as a safe dish for potlucks because it could be made ahead and transported easily. For families, it was a treat that required almost no cooking skills, yet looked impressive in a glass bowl. It captured the era's fascination with convenience foods while still managing to feel special. The creamy texture made it different from ordinary gelatin, which is why it remained so popular for decades. Potato spam and mustard sandwich spread was another recipe that thrived in the era of canned convenience and quick preparation. Chopped spam was mixed with mustard, mayonnaise, and sometimes relish, then spread generously onto bread or crackers. It provided a salty, tangy punch that was both filling and inexpensive, making it a go-to option for school lunches, picnics, or hurried family dinners. Families appreciated it because it could be made in large quantities with minimal cost and effort. The spread stored well and could be dressed up with lettuce or cheese, but it was satisfying even in its plain form. Spam was celebrated in cookbooks of the time for its versatility, and this sandwich spread was one of its most practical applications. While Spam recipes are less common today, this spread embodies the no-nonsense creativity of the period, when convenience foods were celebrated for helping families save both money and time. Pickled watermelon rind was a historic Southern delicacy that used preserved watermelon rinds pickled with vinegar, sugar, and spices to create a crunchy, tangy treat. This inventive recipe transformed what was once considered waste into a flavorful snack or condiment. Pickling extended the shelf life of the rind and added layers of sweet and sour flavor, often enhanced with cinnamon sticks, cloves, or peppercorns. The dish showcased ingenuity in preservation methods, especially important before refrigeration was widespread. It was commonly served alongside savory dishes or enjoyed as a sweet and tangy accompaniment during meals. Pickled watermelon rind reflected the resourceful spirit of African American kitchens, where nothing edible was wasted. Its unique texture and flavor made it a memorable part of traditional Southern cuisine. Though less common today, this delicacy offers a fascinating glimpse into culinary history and preservation techniques. Stuffed green peppers with rice and beef were a practical, filling dish commonly served in community meals and church suppers. The peppers were hollowed out and filled with a savory mixture of cooked rice, ground beef, onions, and seasonings, then baked in a tomato-based sauce until tender and flavorful. This recipe maximized inexpensive ingredients while offering a visually appealing and satisfying main course that could feed many. The stuffed peppers reflected a balance of nutrition and economy, making use of available vegetables and pantry staples to create a wholesome meal. Church groups often chose this dish for its ease of preparation and ability to be made in large casseroles, perfect for sharing. Its warm, hearty flavors evoked a sense of comfort and togetherness, aligning with the values of hospitality cherished in communal dining. Stuffed green peppers also showed how immigrant culinary traditions blended with American ingredients to form dishes beloved in church kitchens across regions. Cabbage and noodles skillet was a quick and economical meal that combined sautéed cabbage with egg noodles for a simple yet satisfying dish. Cabbage was often abundant and inexpensive, making it a reliable vegetable during times when other produce might be costly or scarce. Egg noodles added texture and carbohydrates, turning the dish into a filling meal suitable for lunch or dinner. The cabbage was typically cooked with onions and a bit of fat or butter to bring out its natural sweetness and mellow bitterness. Seasonings were kept simple, focusing on salt and pepper or a dash of vinegar to brighten flavors. This recipe was common in old Betty Crocker cookbooks and regional American kitchens, especially those influenced by Eastern European traditions. The dish showcased how humble ingredients could be transformed into a nourishing meal that stretched budgets without sacrificing taste or satisfaction. Baked cinnamon sugar donuts were a simple and fast sweet treat that became a beloved snack for families looking to enjoy dessert without a long wait. Made from a quick batter that was baked instead of fried, these donuts were then tossed in a mixture of cinnamon and sugar, creating a delightful crunchy coating and soft interior. Their appeal came from combining familiar flavors with a method that suited busy schedules, offering a dessert that could be ready in under 10 minutes. These donuts captured the essence of home baking in the 1950s and 1960s, when convenience and comfort needed to coexist. The warm spice of cinnamon gave the donuts a nostalgic edge, reminding many of holidays and special occasions. Baked cinnamon sugar donuts were an accessible way to enjoy a treat that felt homemade and satisfying without the fuss of traditional frying. Mashed rutabagas were a less common but beloved vintage side dish that brought a buttery, creamy twist to a hearty root vegetable. This mashed treat was a staple in many Betty Crocker cookbooks, especially during times when variety was sought beyond the usual potatoes. Rutabagas, with their slightly sweet and earthy flavor, were boiled and mashed with butter and cream to create a smooth, comforting side that paired beautifully with roasted meats and stews. Their pale yellow color and mild taste made them a subtle yet satisfying addition to any plate. Unlike the more familiar mashed potatoes, rutabagas offered a slightly different texture, and a hint of natural sweetness that made the dish feel special. It was a side that echoed simpler times and frugal kitchens, where every ingredient was stretched and savored. Mashed rutabagas stood as a testament to vintage American cooking's ability to find comfort in unexpected places. Cheesy spinach squares were what you made when you wanted to sneak something green into a potluck plate without getting too many complaints. You would mix chopped spinach, frozen or fresh, with eggs, shredded cheddar cheese, and a little flour and baking powder to bind it all together. Then it was poured into a baking dish, cooked until firm, and sliced into neat little squares. They were good warm or cold, which made them perfect for women's circles, bridal showers, and youth group meetings where you could not count on an oven being available. The flavor was mild but rich, and the texture fell somewhere between a quiche and a savory brownie. These squares were especially loved by the women who brought them because they were just so easy. No crust, no fuss, just a big mixing bowl and a square pan. They showed up in dozens of church cookbooks from the 1960s and 1970s, often with hand-scribbled notes in the margin like "add nutmeg" or "great with hot sauce." You might not think of spinach as a crowd pleaser, but when it came baked with cheese and egg into a tidy little square, it sure had a way of disappearing fast. Vinegar pie filling thickener was one of those odd tricks that worked better than it had any right to. Older fruit pies often came out runny, too sweet, or flat. A splash of vinegar helped in two ways. First, it cut the sugary taste and brought the fruit's brightness back. Second, it helped the flour or starch bind the filling together. Some even said it helped fruit hold its shape. You saw this most in old apple or berry pies, where just a teaspoon gave the flavor a sharp little kick. It was not something most people noticed, but if it was missing, you could tell. The sharp smell faded in the oven, leaving behind something more balanced. A clean slice, no leaks. Some tricks are bold. This one just did its job, and did it well. Jellied chicken salad cubes were one of those appetizers you had to see to believe. And once you did, you could not forget them. You would mix cooked chicken, chopped celery, maybe some pimentos or olives into a savory gelatin base, pour it into a mold, and slice it into neat little cubes once it's set. Served cold with toothpicks, it was part salad, part finger food, and completely normal if you were flipping through an old community cookbook from the 1950s or 1960s. Back then, gelatin was the blank canvas for all kinds of creations, and savory salads in wobbly cube form were considered modern, practical, and just fancy enough for special occasions. You saw these cubes at women's club luncheons, church events, or the neighborhood potluck where everyone showed off their latest recipe finds. Sure, it sounds strange now, but back then, molded salads meant you knew your way around a kitchen and a grocery budget. They quietly disappeared as times changed. Cucumber and sour cream slaw was the kind of cool, crisp side dish that showed up quietly at family picnics, luncheons, and Sunday dinners long before store-bought coleslaw took over. It was simple to make, but packed the refreshing punch you wanted next to a hot, heavy meal. Thin cucumber slices were tossed in sour cream, vinegar, dill, and sometimes a little sugar, creating a creamy, tangy salad that balanced fried chicken, pork chops, or pot roast. This was a summertime favorite, straight from those old cookbooks where frugality ruled the kitchen. Folks needed side dishes that stretched ingredients but still made meals feel whole, especially when gardens overflowed with cucumbers. You would find this slaw chilling in glass bowls at potlucks and reunions, cooling everyone off after long days in stuffy kitchens. It is nearly forgotten now, but for decades, this creamy cucumber salad was the quiet hero of summer tables, showing how something simple like a cucumber and sour cream could make a meal feel complete. Number 21. Green corn soup. Green corn meant fresh corn, straight off the cob before it dried out. You sliced the kernels off, scraped the cob with the back of a knife to get the milk, and simmered everything in water or broth until the starch from the corn thickened the pot on its own. No flour, no cream, just corn and its own liquid doing all the work. Green corn soup was a summer staple in old American cookbooks because corn was free if you grew it yourself, and almost everybody did. Some recipes added a handful of lima beans. Others crumbled in salt pork. The foundation was always fresh corn, a sharp knife, and a pot of water. Number 21. Navy bean soup. Number 21 on this list came straight out of the 1931 joy of cooking, back when a pound of navy beans cost 9 cents and a smoked ham hock ran another 12. Irma Rombauer printed the recipe in her self-published first edition, and 3,000 copies went out from a small press in St. Louis that normally printed shoebox labels. The cook soaked a pound of dried beans overnight in cold water, drained them in the morning, and dropped them into a heavy pot with the ham hock, a chopped yellow onion, and 6 cups of water. The whole pot simmered 3 hours over a low flame until the beans broke down and the broth turned thick and milky. A loaf of cornbread on the side turned 21 cents of groceries into a Sunday supper for 8 people. Butterhorns rolled flaky, buttery pastry around sweet fillings of ground nuts, creating crescent shapes that shattered into tender layers with each bite. The dough demanded European technique. Cold butter worked into flour until the mixture resembled coarse meal, then bound with sour cream to create pastry that baked into countless delicate layers. After chilling until firm, the dough was rolled, filled with cinnamon sugar and ground walnuts, then shaped into crescents that curved like tiny horns on baking sheets. The transformation in the oven was magical. Flat crescents puffed slightly, while surfaces turned golden and layers separated into flaky strata. Powdered sugar dusted over warm horns clung to their ridged surfaces like frost. Austrian, Hungarian, and German families each claimed butterhorns as their own, variations reflecting regional preferences. These labor-intensive treats represented serious Christmas baking, the kind that took entire afternoons and filled kitchens with aromas drawing families together. Cornstarch pudding gave families an economical dessert alternative when eggs and milk for custard cost more than budgets allowed during lean Thanksgiving seasons. Cornstarch was mixed with sugar, a pinch of salt, and whatever flavoring was available, vanilla extract if affordable, or simply cinnamon and nutmeg from the spice cabinet. Cold milk was stirred in gradually to prevent lumps, then the mixture was cooked slowly on the stovetop, stirring constantly until it thickened into smooth, creamy pudding that coated the spoon. The pudding was poured into individual serving dishes and chilled until set, sometimes topped with a sprinkle of cinnamon or a few raisins for decoration. The texture was surprisingly luxurious despite humble ingredients, smooth and rich on the tongue. A single box of cornstarch costing 15 cents could make enough pudding to serve 8 people as dessert, making it one of the most economical sweet endings possible. Sloppy Joe pizza pie was exactly what it sounds like, a casserole that mashed together 2 American favorites into one quirky dish. The recipe called for making a Sloppy Joe mixture using Campbell's tomato soup, spreading it over biscuit or crescent roll dough in a pan, and then topping with cheese before baking. It was gooey, messy, and loaded with flavor, making it a hit for kids and casual family dinners. The pizza angle was mostly in name only since the dish resembled more of a deep dish pie than a pizza. Still, it gave families an affordable weeknight option that felt fun and filling. Sloppy Joe pizza pie enjoyed a brief run of popularity in the 1960s and 70s, but eventually disappeared once frozen pizzas and easy mixes took over the market. It survives only as one of those quirky hybrid recipes that shows just how inventive Campbell's cookbooks once were. Crescent roll Sloppy Joe cups were a mid-century reinvention of a thrifty, messy meal into something portable and neat. Instead of piling the saucy beef mixture onto bread, home cooks pressed crescent dough into muffin tins and filled each cup with Sloppy Joe filling. The result was handheld, less messy, and still carried all the flavor of the original. This was the kind of idea that spoke directly to busy families who wanted dinners that could be eaten quickly without fuss. Leftovers could easily be repurposed this way, which made them budget-friendly as well. Betty Crocker promoted these cups as clever solutions for stretching meals and making them feel fresh again. Children loved the novelty of pulling a filled crescent cup out of the pan, and parents liked that they could portion control with ease. They became one of those recipes that made weeknights feel less chaotic and more put together, while still staying affordable and satisfying. Breakfast pancakes from Instant Mash proved that even convenience products could be reimagined into something homey and satisfying. Old cookbooks often suggested taking leftover mashed potatoes, or even instant ones prepared quickly, mixing them with an egg and a little flour, then frying them in a skillet until golden. In less than 10 minutes, you had crispy, comforting patties that worked for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The beauty of this hack was how it turned something as simple as potato flakes into a versatile dish with real character. Families enjoyed topping them with sour cream, applesauce, or gravy, depending on what was available. For homemakers trying to save time while still offering variety, this recipe felt like a small victory. It proved that even shortcuts could deliver a dish that tasted just as good as traditional versions. Tomato juice cocktail with celery salt was one of the simplest recipes found in old cookbooks, yet it carried an aura of sophistication in its time. Poured straight from the can into a glass, the tomato juice was seasoned with celery salt and sometimes a splash of lemon juice. It was often served as a refreshing starter before meals or as a mid-afternoon pick-me-up, believed to aid digestion and provide a boost of energy. In the 1950s and 60s, when vegetable juices were heavily marketed as health drinks, this cocktail was a fashionable choice for luncheons and dinner parties. Its bold flavor stood out from sweeter drinks, making it an acquired taste, but one that many adults grew to enjoy. The ease of preparation and minimal ingredients made it appealing for hosts who wanted something quick yet stylish. Though it has been overshadowed by modern beverages, tomato juice cocktail with celery salt once represented a time when even simple drinks carried a sense of ceremony. Homemade sorghum syrup was a traditional sweetener made by boiling down juice from sorghum cane into a thick, dark syrup used in baking, glazing, and as a table condiment. Sorghum syrup was prized for its robust flavor and affordability, especially in Southern African American households, where it was a pantry staple. The syrup provided a molasses-like sweetness that enhanced cornbread, cakes, and biscuits, adding moisture and depth. Its production was often a communal activity in rural areas, connecting families through shared labor and tradition. Sorghum syrup was favored during times when refined sugar was scarce or expensive, serving as a natural alternative with rich cultural significance. Recipes from old cookbooks highlight its versatility and importance in everyday cooking. Today, sorghum syrup continues to be cherished by those preserving Southern foodways and seeking authentic flavors from the past. Chow mein casserole was a distinctly American adaptation that found a place in church potlucks, merging Asian-inspired flavors with traditional baking methods. This casserole typically combined crunchy chow mein noodles with ground meat, vegetables such as celery and onions, and a creamy or savory sauce, all baked until bubbling and golden. It was a clever way to incorporate the popular takeout dish into a format suitable for large gatherings and budget-conscious cooks. The casserole offered texture contrasts and a mild, comforting flavor profile that appealed to a wide audience, including those unfamiliar with authentic Asian cuisine. It became a favorite because it was easy to prepare in advance, transport, and serve in slices. Chow mein casserole stood as a symbol of culinary fusion and community adaptability, showcasing how churches embraced diverse recipes and made them their own. Its continued presence in some old cookbooks highlights its lasting appeal as a nostalgic and practical supper option. Rice pudding with raisins was a beloved sweet treat in many American homes, especially when families wanted to make the most of leftover rice. This dessert combined cooked rice with milk, sugar, and often a splash of vanilla or cinnamon for flavor. Raisins added a natural sweetness and a chewy texture that brightened each spoonful. The recipe was simple and affordable, relying on staples that most kitchens already had. Rice pudding was usually baked or simmered slowly until it became creamy and thick, offering comfort after a humble meal. This dish was often served warm, but could also be enjoyed cold, making it a versatile option for different seasons. Because rice was inexpensive and filling, rice pudding was a perfect way to end a meal without wasting leftovers or expensive ingredients. It appeared frequently in Betty Crocker cookbooks and community recipe collections, highlighting its importance in budget-conscious cooking. Families appreciated rice pudding, not only for its taste, but also because it felt like a small indulgence during lean times. It brought sweetness and warmth to the table when resources were scarce, showing how simple ingredients could create something memorable. creamed peas on toast were a humble yet comforting meal that brought together tender peas and a creamy white sauce served over warm toast. This simple recipe used frozen or canned peas cooked gently in a sauce made from butter, flour, and milk to create a rich topping that was both satisfying and quick to prepare. Often enjoyed as a light lunch or snack, creamed peas on toast offered a balance of textures and flavors that appealed across generations. It was an easy way to turn pantry staples into a warming dish that felt both familiar and indulgent. The recipe's quick cook time and minimal ingredients matched the mid-century focus on practicality and taste. Many families came to associate this dish with homey comfort and the ingenuity of making the most of what was on hand. Pickled cucumber relish was a tangy and crunchy condiment that brought zip and brightness to meals, often found alongside classic meat dishes. This relish, made from finely chopped pickled cucumbers mixed with onions and spices, was a staple in many Betty Crocker cookbooks as a quick way to add flavor contrast and freshness to the dinner plate. The sharp, acidic bite of the pickles balanced rich and savory mains, while the crunchy texture provided a satisfying counterpoint. This relish was versatile, serving as a side accompaniment, a topping for sandwiches, or a tangy addition to barbecue plates. Its bright green color and lively taste made it a beloved component of many mid-century American meals. The relish's easy preparation and long shelf life made it a practical favorite in home kitchens. It perfectly captured the era's love for bold flavors and simple, accessible recipes that elevated everyday meals. Barley and beef hot dish was not just dinner, it was survival food disguised as comfort. You would take ground beef, brown it with onion, and stir in pearl barley, diced tomatoes, maybe some frozen corn or green beans if you had them. Everything went into a casserole dish and baked until the barley softened and soaked up every last drop of flavor. This was a meal that stretched far, filled deep, and cost almost nothing to make. It was a regular fixture in Midwest and Prairie Church cookbooks, where hot dish meant any warm, baked, one-pan meal that could carry a family through the week. Barley was one of those ingredients that folks kept on hand even if they did not cook with it often. It lasted forever and went with just about anything. When meat was scarce or expensive, barley helped bulk things out without feeling like a compromise. The beef was there for flavor, the barley for weight, and the vegetables for whatever nutrition you could scrape together. This dish fed church families, volunteer teams, and tired mothers who just needed one night off from thinking about supper. It was humble food, but it held people together. Bacon grease as a biscuit fat substitute was not just clever, it was common sense. When butter was too pricey or scarce and shortening was rationed, folks used what was already in the pan. Bacon grease, saved in a can or jar near the stove, became the go-to for biscuits, cornbread, and frying. It added depth, richness, and just a hint of smoke. Strained to remove bits, chilled until firm, it worked like lard and made everything taste better. You saw it in Southern cookbooks, recipe cards, and wartime pamphlets. For many, it was just the way things were done, and if someone threw it out, they probably did not grow up cooking. It was humble, it was honest, and it made unforgettable biscuits. Sardine and cream cheese spread was one of those Depression-era staples that somehow snuck its way into mid-century parties and stayed there for a while. You would mash up canned sardines with cream cheese, maybe toss in some lemon juice or chopped onion, and spread it onto toast points or crackers. Sounds unusual today, but back then, it was a clever, budget-friendly way to turn pantry staples into something that felt special. Sardines were cheap, full of protein, and easy to store, which made them a go-to for households stretching every dollar. Paired with creamy cheese, they became a bold, salty appetizer that showed up at potlucks, luncheons, and card games across America. You would find the recipe scribbled on index cards, tucked in church cookbooks, or clipped from magazine pages your grandmother saved. Sure, the flavors were strong, but they filled a table, stretched the grocery budget, and gave people a little bite of something different. Over time, fancier appetizers took over. Rice ring with creamed vegetables was the side you pulled out to impress, even if all you had was rice, peas, and a few carrots. This molded rice dish showed up at luncheons, community suppers, and potlucks from the 1930s to the 60s, proving how fancy rice could look with the right presentation. You cooked seasoned rice, packed it into a bundt or gelatin mold, and once it's set, filled the center with creamy peas, carrots, and maybe mushrooms or green beans if you had them. It was affordable, filling, and looked fancier than it really was. These molded sides were all the rage, straight from vintage cookbooks with curled edges and faded ink. Rice ring with creamed vegetables was a no-nonsense way to stretch pantry staples while making the table look proper. You hardly see it outside old recipe cards now, but back then, it was a thrifty, creative dish that added kitchen pride to any meal. Number 20. Parsnip soup. Parsnips were the potato of colonial America. Before the potato took over, parsnips were what you grew, stored in the root cellar, and ate all winter. Parsnip soup was standard. You diced them, simmered them in broth until they went soft, mashed them with a fork, and stirred in a little butter. The taste was sweet and nutty and completely unlike potato soup. Old cookbooks from the 1700s and early 1800s list parsnip soup alongside carrot soup and turnip soup as though all three were equally common. They were. Then the potato won, and parsnips were pushed to the edge of the garden and eventually out of it entirely. There was a reason the soup pot sat on the back of the stove from Monday to Saturday. It knew something that modern cooking has forgotten. It knew that flavor does not come from a recipe. It comes from time. Every bone, every scrap of onion, every knob of celery that went into that pot made the next bowl better than the last. Your grandmother did not call it layering. She did not call it building a fond. She just kept the pot going. And the soup on Friday tasted nothing like the soup on Monday because 5 days of scraps had turned plain water into something that smelled like the whole week pressed into a single spoon. No cookbook explained this. The pot just knew. Number 20. Cream-chipped beef on toast. Soldiers nicknamed this one SOS in the trenches and on the troop ships, and the name stuck so hard that home cooks used it openly at the breakfast table by 1946. The 1910 Manual for Army Cooks held the first printed version, and the August 1944 TM10-412 Field Manual fixed the recipe in the form that came home with 2 million returning servicemen. A jar of dried beef ran 19 cents, shredded by hand into a hot pan of butter and flour, and a cup of whole milk went in slow with constant stirring until the gravy thickened. The salty beef did the seasoning work on its own, so the cook added nothing else but black pepper. The pan poured over 2 slices of toasted bread, and a family of 5 ate breakfast for under 40 cents in 1948. Spritz cookies emerged from cookie presses in perfect ridged rosettes, stars, and trees that covered Christmas platters across Scandinavian and German-American homes. The dough had to be mixed exactly right. Too soft and it wouldn't hold its shape, too stiff and it wouldn't press through the metal plates. Butter, sugar, eggs, and almond extract combined into a rich paste that filled the barrel of treasured cookie presses passed down from mothers and grandmothers. Children watched in fascination as cranking the handle produced perfect shapes onto baking sheets, each one identical yet somehow unique. The cookies baked quickly, just until edges turned golden while centers stayed pale and tender. Some families tinted portions of dough pink or green for holiday variety, while others kept theirs butter yellow and pure. Spritz required the right equipment and the right technique, making them special occasion cookies that appeared only at Christmas. The press itself often came from the old country, its metal worn smooth from decades of use. Cabbage slaw with boiled dressing provided crisp, tangy freshness on Thanksgiving tables when lettuce was expensive or unavailable during November's cold weather months. A head of cabbage was shredded finely by hand using sharp knives or box graters, creating thin strips that filled large bowls generously. The boiled dressing was made by cooking together vinegar, sugar, a beaten egg, and a little flour until thickened and smooth, then cooling it before tossing with the raw cabbage. Some cooks added grated carrots or chopped apples when available, stretching the slaw further while adding color and nutrition. The result was crunchy, sweet, sour, and refreshing, providing textural contrast to soft, rich holiday foods. A single head of cabbage cost less than 20 cents, and made enough slaw to feed 12 people when dressed properly. The boiled dressing used less oil than mayonnaise-based versions, saving money while still providing creamy coating. Cheeseburger soup bake was one of those dishes that tried to bring the diner favorite into the oven without much fuss. It stacked layers of ground beef, tomato soup, pasta or biscuit dough, and melted cheese together until it resembled a lasagna gone American. The idea was that you could have the rich flavor of a cheeseburger in a single casserole dish, and mothers loved it because it fed a crowd while using only pantry staples. The soup added tang, the cheese added comfort, and the beef made it filling enough to pass for dinner even with smaller portions. Campbell's marketed it as a new family favorite, but in truth it was more of a novelty than a tradition. While children were often thrilled by the gooey layers, adults found it heavy and repetitive after a few tries. As frozen lasagna and frozen pizzas began filling freezers, the cheeseburger soup bake faded into the background. Still, it showed just how inventive cooks became with soup cans. Not one of those recipes required a culinary degree or a single ingredient you could not find at any grocery store in America. They were written by people who cooked because the family needed to eat, not because it looked good on a screen. Every last one of them still works today, exactly the way it did 50 years ago. If one of these recipes brought back a kitchen you have not stood in for years, leave the name of the person who cooked in it down in the comments. Hit subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the old cookbook shelf.